Hi, this is Pat Fraley, purveyor of dog and villain voices. And you're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
Hey, it's David K., voice of Beast Wars Megatron and TFA Optimus. You're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
GeekCastRadio.com presents the GeekCast Radio Top 100 Animated Films Countdown.
Will Andy pick me?
Don't count on it! Oh! Yeah!
Hello and welcome to GeekCast Radio. This is episode 56. I am one of your hosts, TF2 and Mike. Joining me is Optimus Solo. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Steve Megatron. Hello.
Hello.
TV's Mr. Neil.
Howdy.
And of course, Motor Old Dan. Hello.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going. Today we are revealing the top 20 of the GCRN Top 100 Animated Films Countdown. It has been a long process getting here, and after what we had 2 weeks ago with episode 54's backlash, oh my god. Kev, you got any info you want to dump on us before we get started?
I haven't felt too much of a backlash from anything. I just think I can't believe how fast we've gone through this list. Relatively, it seems like we just flew
Can't
through
believe
this.
we've got it done before Christmas.
Just a couple things, I guess, to look for in this one. That we're finally to the end of the line here. We're finally to the top 20. As we've been going through this, there's been different shifts as far as how many of these will we see, or how many more will this be. Obviously, there's no more room for anything else. So we're getting to the time where the discussion shifts a little bit. And I think one thing that I find interesting looking at once you get to this end of the list, or any list like you're doing like this, I think one of the main questions is, before people question, should something be on the top 100, should it not? Really, I would think those arguments can kind of go by the wayside for this episode. I would hope that anything in our top 20, the argument's not whether it should be in the top 100 or not. It's just whether it's placed, where it should be placed. But I would hope that everyone would be kind of universal, that all of these films deserve somewhere in the top 100. And I will apologize in advance for anyone I call out or reverse the train on as far as throwing them under it. But something that boggles my mind for some of these is how certain films can be left off of somebody's top 100 list entirely. So I'll go about it in the nicest way possible, as far as talking about certain films that were left off people's list entirely. But it's going to answer all the questions here today. We're going to answer, not as far as stuff that we'll do in the wrap up, but all the things will be revealed, so people could figure out, how many, which decades are best represented, which companies are best represented, and then we will obviously comment on all of that in the wrap up. But it should be interesting. I know nobody really knows the results, so people might be nervous especially since we did not give the honorable mentions. So now it comes time to figure out, was that film that you've been waiting for just completely left off of our list, or did it find a spot in our top 20? And if we didn't have them before, I think last episode we saw 3 people's number ones fall, with Akira, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Grave of the Fireflies. And obviously we had one fall previous to that with Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. So that was really only 4 people's number one. So as we go through, we will see an onslaught of people's number ones, obviously, and people's number 2s and 3s and everything. So it'll be interesting to see how we boil this down. Dan, kind of go around the panel here real quick before we get into it, and before we pass it back to Mike before we start. But thoughts, fears, hopes on the journey so far and on what we have left for today, Dan?
Well, after the threat last week, you talk about fears. I am doing tonight's podcast with a paintball mask on, just in case Neil's number one does not make the top 20. But I guess my fear, I think the best podcasts this far, at least talking wise, have been the ones that have been a mixture, or at least somewhat of a mixture of different types of animation, whether it be like anime versus traditional, or classic versus claymation or CGI. So part of me wonders, when we get into this top 20, will we see more of that? Will we just get a lot of CGI animation? Will we just get current stuff, because that's been dominating the list, at least in my mind, and that may not be number wise. So that's not necessarily a fear, just an idea, or a question I have. And two, I guess seriously though, thinking about if anyone's number one doesn't make the list, doesn't make the top 100. Because we don't know that at this point. So that'd be kind of cool to see if there's actually a number one out there that doesn't miss the list completely. And two, I think I have an idea of what number one is. I have some money riding on it in Vegas, so hopefully it turns out to be correct.
Is there any film specifically, Dan, without naming the film, that you're worried is not going to show up on the list at all that you were hoping to see?
There's one I'm worried that will show up, and one that I'm worried that will not show up. Specifically, but so yeah, I guess the answer to that question would be yes.
All right, Mike, thoughts before we get into today on the countdown so far and what we have looking forward to today?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think it's going to be called into question. The list will be if 20 to 11 are all Disney sequels. I will say this again in the wrap up, and it's more so to address what you said earlier about how people can leave stuff off their lists. For me personally, number one, I was not going to go back and watch every animated film there ever was in preparation to do this countdown.
No, and I agree.
No, I know. I'm not saying this against you. I'm just telling the people in general. I've seen on the website comments of, oh, how can you not have seen this? How can you not have seen that? And this, that, and the other thing, and everything else. And for me, if I haven't seen a film, it doesn't get ranked in my personal, list that I submitted for this collaboration. So that may sound like I'm being closed-minded. No, I'm not. I don't watch every single animated film ever.
I kind of brought that up more as not saying that someone was wrong for not including it, but more so bringing it up on I'd love to have the conversation with people on why certain things aren't included. Is it because you haven't seen it? Is it because you're just biased against it for some reason and you ignore its kind of acclaim or its impact?
It's false acclaim is what you're getting at here.
No, I'm just saying in general what the reasoning is.
Yeah. But no, as far as like what's in the top 20, as we've stated, only Optimus Solo knows that as we reveal these, and I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping, honestly, really, I'm outside of maybe 3 Disney films. I'm hoping the rest are not Disney.
Yeah, we'll have to see which companies are represented in the top 20. And before we get to Neil and Steve, throw out a few minor stats for you. We've been going over points the whole time because obviously the max number of points you could possibly get was 2,000. And with Ratatouille, which came in at 21 last week, we reached the 1,000 point mark. So everything in the top 20 obviously has over half the possible points. And only 2 films that we will talk about today were appeared on less than 16 lists. So there's only 2 films that did not appear on at least 16 out of the 20 collaborative lists that were put out there. And something else we might talk a tiny bit about is some rankings if you just took based off people that did rank them. But yeah, we'll see. Steve, any thoughts on the countdown so far, or what's without naming, specific movies, what you're looking forward to or in fear of for today's episode? Any films that you are worried might not make it?
No, I mean, I'm not really that worried. I'm kind of curious to see what is going to be in the top 20. Uh, Whether it be something everybody's voted very highly on, or just many people or everybody voted on something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious to see what comes in. I'm a little disappointed at the previous episode falling of my number 2, but not to dig back down that rat hole. But no, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with it so far. I mean, yeah, the next time things will come out differently, but this time it's interesting to say the least to see what's coming up.
And Neil coming through, kind of joining the crew as far as the actual records go for these last 40 out of the 100, and being able to listen and look at what has come previously. What are your thoughts, just overall in general, on the countdown so far?
Well, coming in late, I don't have a strong opinion about a lot of the entries that have come so far. Going into the top 20, there's a couple Disney films that I'm pretty sure are going to be there, and then there's at least 2 that I'm kind of worried won't show up that I'm really rooting for. That's about all I have at the moment.
Okay. And one last question for, let's throw this one to Dan here. We have talked previously about the companies and which ones have shown up, which ones hadn't, and then there was kind of a long wait for the first film from Pixar. And we kind of decided that it was much longer than any of us expected for our first Pixar film to show up. We've had 4 Pixar films so far in the countdown. Shot in the dark, how many Pixar films do you expect to see in the top 20?
You know what? I'll cut it in half and I'll say, I don't even know the total off my top of my head, but I'll say 10.
So half of the remaining countdown could possibly be from Pixar?
Yeah, I'll go with the over and say 10.
All right. Mike, take it away.
All right, so we are here to reveal the top 20, numbers 20 through 1. And here we go.
20.
All right, let's start it off with number 20. It's weird, it's kind of interesting. Every time we reveal one, it's like one less spot for someone to see their movie show up. Let's start somewhere where we knew we would go somewhere in this top 20. We knew we would travel to the wonderful world of Disney at some point. We're going to start off there, and we're going to start with a film from 1967. It was on everybody except for 2 lists, 1,021 points. The highest it ranked, though, was the highest I got ranked was number 7. Nobody ranked it higher than 7. It comes in at number 20, and that is Disney's The Jungle Book. Like I said, only 2 people left this off of their list. 86 Rotten Tomato score. Mike, your opinions on The Jungle Book, starting off our countdown at number 20.
It's a memorable movie, but top 20, no.
Very enthused reaction from
Just
Mike.
no. Well, it's an interesting film. It does. If you think about it, it probably appeals to a lot of people who were adopted, because it is about an adopted boy who was adopted. I don't know. It's one of those weird movies. It really is. The Disney version is probably the best version you could actually watch. That it doesn't just take the whole context of the story to weigh out weird places. But all the Disney movies that we talked about in episode 55 are so much better than Jungle Book.
I disagree with that somewhat. I don't know. For me, if I was to rank my top 10 Disney films, and I'm not doing that, so I'm not saying like 100% I know what they would be, but I'm pretty sure Jungle Book would be in my top 10 list of all-time Disney films. And being in my top 10 Disney films, does it deserve to be in top 20 overall? I guess it would come down to the math and figure out where it ranks. I had it in my top 20 on my 100 list, so I have no problem with it. I love the music. This one is similar to me in how I feel and how I react to Robin Hood. I don't know. I really like these 2. This is I think my brother's favorite Disney film, so maybe that has something to do with it, me being exposed to it more so over the my childhood. But I have no problem with this one being in our top 20. Neil, what do you think about Jungle Book?
I like the Jungle Book. I don't know if I'd put it up this high, but it's a good film. I find the animation more appealing than the actual story. Like I said last time, I kind of like that era of Disney where it kind of looks like it came off of a Xerox machine. It kind of has that kind of sort of dirty look to it, and that's what this has. I I'd say it's maybe 5-10 spaces too high, but I still like it. It's a good film, and I'm okay with it being here.
Steve, how do you like the Jungle Book? You've had interesting opinions on you've seen a ton of Disney films, if not all of them. It seems like, and you said you had quite a library of them, and you have some interesting opinions on some of them. How do you feel about the Jungle Book?
I find this one a little bit more enjoyable than some of the other ones. Example being like Cinderella or Dumbo or stuff like that. I find I can watch this one more than those films. So I definitely can see where it belongs in the top 100. I don't know if I would put it in the top 20 per se. I could have seen that more or less in the previous episode that we recorded, but I mean, I don't have a problem with it overall. I mean, it's the voice acting's fun in it, the songs, the animation actually isn't bad for the time compared to some other ones that were around that time. But funny enough that it's this particular number. It's the 19th animated feature film by Walt Disney animated series. So it's
Definitely.
It's funny that it ranks this close to that number. But yeah, it's overall it's a good film. Like I said, that's where I would rank it, is in maybe the 40 to 21 section. But
And interesting, as I said, also remember that I said it landed on 18 lists, but nobody ranked it higher than 7. So this was one of those cases where it got up to the 20 mark more so based on universal appeal, and that it was on almost everybody's list, and not so much that it was so high on anybody in particular's list. I mean, if you average it out, it would have probably fallen into our 40 range somewhere, based on how it was voted on. But so many people had it that it falls into our number 20 spot. Dan, what's your reaction on Jungle Book?
I think it's 100% belongs in the top 20. I mean, it may be a few spots too high. I probably would put Dumbo and Pinocchio higher than it, but something like Robin Hood and some of the other Disney movies we talked about, I think it's superior then. And yes, like Neil mentioned, the story isn't all that dynamic, or there's not much to it, but I think what works with it is that it's just loaded with interesting characters. We mentioned with Bambi that the main character in Bambi is not that interesting. It's the characters around Bambi. And the same thing with Jungle Book. You have Baloo, Shere Khan, just this assortment of interesting characters that you really just travel to, in between, back and forth. And I think that's what makes Jungle Book work. And, Bare Necessities, one of the best Disney songs of all time. I would say top 10, top 5. And 2, I mean, this also let us get Tailspin, so points for it there.
That's true. I think, too, if you had to take a Disney film and ask people, like, if you were asking, like, a general consensus or just, like, a general survey on, name your favorite character from a film, I think you bring up a good point. I think Jungle Book would have the most different amount of characters named somewhere in there, whether it be King Louie or, like you said, Baloo, Bagheera, Shere Khan, Mowgli, etc. Like, there is so many different people for people to either relate to or gravitate towards, compared to, your standard film where you have, 1, 2, maybe 3 characters that people really are drawn to. So I think that's part of its appeal. I think the variety of characters and the music has a lot to do with it. All right, so we start off with the Jungle Book in the wonderful world of Disney, and it should be interesting. Like we said, we had predictions on how many Pixar films we might see. I guess I should have asked how many Disney films will we see. So let's see where we go from here.
19.
All right, at number 19, we stay with Disney for a unique Disney film, I guess. Going back to 1940, at number 19, we have Fantasia. It is only on 14 lists. That is the lowest we will see in this entire episode, a film only appearing on 14 lists. So those people that did rank it, ranked it pretty high. And it is another number one to fall. One of our contributors had this at number one, so they will be somewhat disappointed. Rotten Tomatoes score of 96. If anything, that deserves to be mentioned on our countdown for its uniqueness, for its impact, for a lot of kind of intangibles, I guess we'd say. We ended with Dan on this last one. Let's start with him on this one. Dan, what's your opinion on Fantasia and how it fits in to all these other movies we're talking about?
Well, it's certainly beautifully animated. There's no doubt there. And I remember as a kid, we watched this in like music class like every year.
Yeah.
And just the use of classic, the music in it is well handled, and all the different little stories. And honestly, most of them I don't remember. The one I think everyone remembers is that with like Mickey and I can't think of the name of it, but with all the brooms and whatnot. But certainly, I'm surprised to see it this high. I don't think I ranked it in my top 20. But I mean, at an animation standpoint, as on a music standpoint, it's certainly an achievement.
Steve, have you seen Fantasia, and what's your opinion on the film?
That's one of the few I've skipped.
Gotcha. And it's definitely not a film for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one, it's that time period. But I mean, I don't necessarily have a problem with it showing up. I just don't. I don't have the information to back up one way or the other.
Fair enough. Neil, what's your opinion on Fantasia? A fan or not?
I like it. It's basically a music video done to classical music. What I like about this movie is that it's basically a compilation. I think every single composition is done with a different director, and so you're getting like different animation styles throughout the entire picture. And I wouldn't say that I'm a classical music aficionado, but it did kind of give me some appreciation for classical music. I did have an album as a kid that was the Nutcracker Suite on one side and Rite of Spring on the other, and it was it was Dance of the Hours. Never mind, but it was done specifically for this picture. It was a Disney release. I think my favorite one is actually Night on Bald Mountain. That's where all the cool animation is. The big demon thing on the top of the mountain, and he's summoning demons. They're all doing a dance, and then it ends with Ave Maria. Excellent film. I was really hoping it would show up in the top 20, just because it does deserve to be here. Ironically enough, I didn't rank it because I didn't know if it really counted, because there are some live action portions. I think there's there's a bridge to the whole thing that just has the performers in live action playing. But I'm glad it's here.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those where the animation kind of was present enough to be an overwhelming majority of the movie. Seems to be. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, but from what my memory holds, it's like, in comparison, on the flip side, like Mary Poppins is 85% live action and has some animation thrown in there. This is like the flip version of that, I guess. Not that it has anything closely related to Mary Poppins. But I agree. I mean, I think some people might be surprised about it, but I definitely think it deserves to be on the list and in the top half of the list. Whether top 20 or not, I think it comes down to math as far as which ones are in it, which ones aren't. But it's definitely deserving to be here somewhere. Like I said, some people might not enjoy the film, and I think kids at some point, maybe the first time they see it might be a little bit confused if they're used to regular Disney films. Regular, I say, because lack of a better term. But I'm happy to see it, and happy that it comes in here. Interesting to be back to back with Jungle Book, which is definitely on the other end of the spectrum for Disney. So all right, let's see who other number one ranking films we can have drop by the wayside as we make our way through our top 20.
18.
Well, it takes skill for another company to wedge a film into the Disney and what we were thinking might possibly be Pixar-dominated top 20, but number 18 has done that. Number 18 is a film from 2001 from DreamWorks, and that would be the original Shrek. 1,038 points on 15 list. Fantasia was only on 14, and Shrek was only on 15. Those are the two lowest as far as the top 20 goes. Everything else is every other film that comes in will be on more lists than that. It was ranked number one by one of our contributors, so we've had consecutive number ones fall. 89 Rotten Tomato score, and a DreamWorks appearance in our top 20. Dan, how do you feel about it, and is it the last?
I would say so, unless I definitely think this is probably, I don't think it's the best DreamWorks. I think that's How to Train Your Dragon, but certainly the most notable one, and probably the one that really launched DreamWorks animation to, to compete, actually show it can compete with Disney. So on that end, I could see why it's deserving of top 20. I don't have an issue with it being in top 20. Similar to like the Ice Age movies and other films, like I think it gets hurt a lot by just the unnecessary amount of sequels. I think if it stood by itself, it wouldn't be, I think it's kind of, people have turned the table and started disliking it a great deal. But the original, I think it's, stands on its own. Good voice cast. Mike Myers, I think, is effective as Shrek, and Eddie Murphy as Donkey. I think when this movie began, that's when that character, obviously stole the movie, and he wasn't overused too much as he was in the later films. So I think it's deserving of top 20 just based upon what it did for that company.
Mike, agree, disagree?
I agree. I don't agree with the whole sequel thing, though, because out of all the sequels we've talked about, Shrek, by far, out of the ones that have shown up on the countdown, Shrek has had the best ones, minus Shrek the Third. That was just a travesty.
And outside of Despicable Me 2, which you had ranked in your top.
Right, but I'm saying, like, films that have had more than one sequel at this point.
Okay.
Shrek, the first one I remember seeing this in theaters. It was cool. It was, it was basically a PG version of Axel Foley as a donkey, which is kind of awesome.
Well, he is an ass.
Yeah, he can be. There are a lot of memorable lines from this one. It does something with fairy tale storytelling that hadn't been done before, where the ugly guy wins, and it's more so a commentary on it doesn't matter what you look like, it more so matters about what your personality is, and I think in the top 20 it deserves to be where it is.
All right, fair enough. Neil, Shrek in our top 20, been on possibly our last DreamWorks film. Is that how it should be?
Probably. I have to make a confession. I was probably one of those people who dinged it for the sequels. Because looking back on it, yeah, it is a lot better than maybe I gave it credit for, and a lot of other people did. So it does deserve to be here. I like that it takes the fairy tale thing. It actually takes it away from Disney. Because Disney has had a virtual monopoly over fairy tales for so long, and this movie finally came along and said, you know what, Pinocchio is going to be in our movie too, and so are the Three Little Pigs, and so are like all these other characters that you're used to seeing only the Disney versions of. So that was cool.
I agree. Steve, are you a Shrek fan or not?
I was in the first film. And then
this is the first film.
I understand that. I'm just saying that it's got the Ice Age syndrome to me. The more they go on, the more I hate them. So yeah, the first film, and I really like the touches that were thrown in there. I like the voice cast, the animation, the fact that they kind of played somewhat dirty jokes as far as the kind of fairy tale characters are concerned, and little kind of pokes at everybody in there. So it's definitely deserving of being in the top 20.
Yeah, I definitely think I had a unique take on something we hadn't really seen done before, and it did it successfully, so much so that it apparently felt like it could continue to do that over and over and over again. So yeah, I agree with most of what you guys have said. I think it's deserving for its impact, and it definitely was one of the most popular films there and franchises for a while. So that definitely says something about it.
The other thing I want to bring up about, not necessarily arguing with Steve, but the whole Ice Age thing, they pretty much, when they got to Forever After, they saw how the plot was progressing and they said, okay, we're going to cancel our, no matter how much money the film makes or doesn't make, we're going to cancel the fifth one, and this is where Shrek's journey should end. So, as far as I know, as far as I can tell doing research online, there are no plans for, an Ice Age type of thing with the Shrek franchise. And that's why I give it a lot more credit than most people do, because yes, it had two sequels in the middle that are kind of iffy at best, with Shrek 2 and Shrek the Third, but overall the franchise itself really introduced, as Neil said, interesting, different take on different characters, and really lovable characters that you find funny in different times. And I mean, the whole gingerbread man thing, I mean, come on, who didn't laugh at that? Every different time something different happened with that. But yeah. So.
All right. Well, we've been to Disney. We've been to DreamWorks. Let's see which company we will go to next.
17.
I haven't brought it up so far in the countdown, but I was interested before we started this whole process and this whole project, how this, I guess what I could call sub-genre of Disney would fare. And I was curious to see how they would rank, and I really haven't brought it up to this point, but outside of, I guess, what you could call the modern ones, Dan, are you surprised we have not seen any of the classic Disney princesses yet?
I honestly didn't even think about that, but that is a good point.
I mean, we saw like Pocahontas and Mulan, I guess, if you want to, I guess they're thrown into that group as well.
And
But
I guess the Princess and the Frog too, but
No, not really.
I guess it's
That's
not a
too modern. That's not classic at all.
I didn't say classic. I just said, Disney princesses as it has become a thing that people. I mean, there's toys about Disney princesses. There's everything about Disney princesses.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't really seen any of the classic ones until now, obviously alluding to this. And that's at number 17. And the first Disney princess classic version, I guess you can say, that we're seeing is from 1950. And that is Disney's Cinderella, coming in at number 17. It was on 17 people's lists. Nobody ranked it higher than 5. Rotten Tomato score of 97. Cinderella, our first classic Disney princess, falling into our top 20 at number 17. Let's see what this group of guys has to say about Cinderella. Let's start with Mike.
I like the film. It's interesting. It kind of gives you in its plot, the whole for happily forever after, and you don't really need a sequel to it, even though there were 2 sequels. The first film, again, just as I said with Shrek, there are so many memorable characters with this, between Bruno the dog, Lucifer the cat, the mice. And again, it seems as if Cinderella, who is the main character, she is not the main focus. Everyone else around her is the main focus. Like, she is the cause and they are the effect. And by them being the effect, they then just cause her to just go crazy. And it's just one of those things where it's a whole back and forth between her and the wicked stepmother and the stepsisters and then all the animals. It's actually, this movie is probably the best Disney has ever done with combining humans and animal interactions. As far as that goes, like, okay, sure, you could argue 101 Dalmatians, but that's more from the dog's point of view. I mean, we even said, I don't know if I said this or not, but the whole opening monologue of 101 is from the dog's point of view, whereas here it's a more of a melding of the two, and having it in the top 20, I think it's good. I just hope one of the other ones isn't on here at all.
And interesting that there must be a couple of people that are anti-Disney because two people in particular left both Jungle Book and Cinderella off of their top 100 list. I won't call them out because they're kind enough to contribute to us. Dan, your thoughts on Cinderella being in our top 20?
It's not one I personally gravitated towards a huge amount. I did rank it. I'm not sure where it's. I don't know. For some reason, it just never appealed all that much to me. I remember just being a kid and rather watching other Disney movies at the time. I had three sisters, so I did have to end up watching this a great deal. I mean, there are certain parts that I did like. Obviously, just the fairy godmother and the transformation scenes. Those are a lot of fun. That song, Bippity Boppity Boop. Again, Bare Necessity is I'd say one of the best Disney songs. And I do, like Mike mentioned with the animals, the mice were always what I loved the most. It's what I cared about the most. I could care less about Cinderella and her plight. I care more about those mice.
If we were going to have a classic Disney princess in our top 20, is this the right one?
Just the princess herself? I don't know. I would go with. There are some other ones I think I'd go with. I don't have an issue with it being in top 20, but I wouldn't call it my favorite Disney princess movie, which is weird to say just out loud.
And I forced you to. No, I'm just kidding. Steve, what's your thoughts on Cinderella, and does it deserve to be in our top 20?
I'm personally not that much of a fan of the film. I've seen it in all of its sequels that are increasingly bad. But I would never have ranked it in the top 20, but I can see why some people could have, or the fact that all of us have ranked it somewhere higher up and it somehow got enough points to get here. But
yeah, it's kind of similar to, not I mean to interrupt you, but kind of similar to Jungle Book, where it's on so many lists, but nobody ranked it higher than 5. So it was more so that it was just on so many lists. I think if you were taking the average, it'd be in our 30s somewhere, but being on so many lists bumps it into our top 20. Continue though.
But yeah, I mean, I can kind of see that. I don't have a problem with it, but I don't know if I'd put it in the top 20.
I know Mike wants to take a moment probably to defend Disney sequels in Cinderella's case. I don't know.
The only one I defend is Twist in Time because it did, again, talking about something that it did with the story that we hadn't seen before. And it basically, in that film, the stepmother got a hold of the wand and trapped the fairy godmother and then went hog wild with it and took everything away from Cinderella. I mean, it's your classic takeaway story, but it was something I was never expecting because I figured the crappy Dream Come True sequel was going to be it for this franchise, and then they released Twist in Time, and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool.
Right. I won't comment on Disney sequels at all. Neil, your thoughts? I haven't got you yet on Cinderella, and do you think it should be in our top 20?
No, I had it much lower than this. I don't think it belongs in the top 20. Of all of the Disney princesses, I think this is one of the least interesting. She's kind of in Mary Sue territory almost because it's basically a story about someone who lives under terrible circumstances and then comes out of it when a wonderful man rescues her. You know, it's not. I don't think it's a very interesting story. I mean, the animation is nice and the songs are okay and
it's
the mice.
Film, yeah, without the animals and the songs, nobody would.
I mean, the only interesting thing about this movie is June Foray is the cat.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Yeah, if you strip some of the stuff away from it, kind of the fluff, you're left with something that maybe a lot of people wouldn't be interested in. But hey, what does a bunch of guys know talking about Cinderella, I guess? I know we've already had the film on our countdown quite a ways back, but I feel like we're going down the rabbit hole here.
16.
I had to bring up something about Disney princesses, didn't I? Let's knock out another one at number 16. Another classic Disney princess. Funny that Mike commented something on the last one. This film would be number 16 on our countdown from 1937, what a lot of people claim as the best animated film of all time if you look at certain rankings and lists, and that is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. over 1,100 points on our list. Only 2 people left it off of their list. That would be Tim and none other than Mike himself, so he'll get to defend that a little bit here. The only 2 people that left it off their list. Nobody ranked it number 1, number 2, or number 3. It got ranked number 4 as its best ranking. I will have some opinions on Snow White in a second, but let's just let Mike get on his soapbox and take it from here.
I remember watching Snow White as a kid, but I don't remember how. I didn't remember until we did the episode in Tooncast Classic of how convoluted that plot is. You want to talk about a plot? You know, Neil was talking about the plot for Cinderella is just bad. This is even worse. It really is. First of all, where are any of the adults in this movie? Because the 7 old midgets that want to do stuff to Snow White don't count. Secondly, who's there to stop the queen from doing whatever she... Why does she want to capture Snow White other than, I must have her beauty. I mean, so many... You know, I mentioned earlier about the Jungle Book, the different versions of the Jungle Book. So many different versions of Snow White. The more crazy, more wacky, more... oh my God, how did they get away with that? Are better than this movie. And, you know, and I'll transition to Kev here for a second because when we did Tooncast Classic episode 29, you had brought up, how is this, you know, the standard of being beautiful with this chick?
Oh yeah, I did go on a tirade about how must be a sign of times how people found Snow White to be the object of the most beautiful person in the world, when in my opinion she's the ugliest Disney princess we've ever had. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I guess kind of going back and forth with you a little bit here, because we definitely shared our bashing of this film on the Tooncast episode. Yes. But what I will say is my point is not... Okay, my point is that I have a problem with people just blindly ranking Snow White as a film as the best of all time or the best animated film of all time, just simply because it was one of the first, if not the first, successful animated film, or the thing that's, you know, kind of started it all off for Disney, et cetera, et cetera. As a historian, I have a problem with things being ranked highly just because they were first. But unlike you, I still feel it deserves to be ranked in the top 100.
Not this high, I don't think.
Well, you didn't have it on your list at all.
Right, because I don't like the movie.
Okay, so I guess there's some separation of bias, and if something that still deserves to be in a top 100 list, I would still rank it in the top 50, if not top, I don't know, 40, 30 maybe. I can have no problem with it being in our top 20 as long as it's not number 1. That's my issue. Let some other people get in on this argument, though, that maybe be able to defend Snow White a little. Dan or Neil?
Well, I think I'll defend it. For one, I regarding people ranking it number 1 blindly, like, I feel uncomfortable saying someone ranking something blindly when I don't know the reasoning for it. So I think that's kind of... Are the people that do that? Maybe, but I don't think there's no basis whatsoever to rank this that high. I personally didn't, obviously, because no one ranked it that high. I'm not sure where I had it. I think I had it in my top 10. And I agree with you, Kevin, that just because you're first doesn't mean you're best. Just because you do some sort of innovation doesn't necessarily mean the overall quality of the film is great. But I think you do have to consider... I did consider some of those factors when I ranked it. For one, the risk that you're taking... Like, there is... If you were to live in a parallel universe where Snow White was not a success, where Snow White critically, financially, we don't know what the ramifications could be, more so than any other movie in some ways. Would we probably get animation still? Of course. I don't think that any movie is that powerful. But would we get the powerhouse that Disney is? Who knows? It may have came later. Regarding the story being convoluted, I don't agree with that at all. I think the story is rather simple. To say it's like, well, what's the witch's mission, or why does she care about her beauty? I mean, I think it's pretty basic. You look at where fairy tales come from. I mean, there are proverbs. They are teaching different lessons about the negative qualities of being a human, and whether it's vainness, whether it's greed, or those different areas. So I think that is why that's simple. There is that simple story. I mean, most fairy tales, are obviously meant for children. Or in some extent, so you're not going to have this, gigantic story full of a lot of different components. It's basically, going to be simple and straightforward. And I think that, like we talked about, it's kind of we're going in circles here, but with the characters, the seven dwarfs, how those kind of set the standard for what Disney was going to do with it. It set that Disney formula. You could argue the Disney formula, this is good or bad, but what came after definitely was impacted by Snow White. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that makes it Snow White a better movie. But I do think you have to get a credit for that. And regarding her beauty, I don't know. I think that's really a matter of taste. So it's hard to really argue against that. Plus, this is this came out in 1937. The ideal beauty in 1937 is a lot different than the ideal beauty now. You look at a cover of magazines or whatever. Snow White was very much a representation of that time period. So I think it's unfair to criticize it for that as well.
Oh no, that was more so tongue in cheek. That's just I understand that that's just a personal.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, would I date her? Probably not. Partially because she's a cartoon. So I personally don't find cartoons attractive. Well,
Ouch.
Jessica Rabbit aside. But yeah,
everyone said that at the same time.
So I do believe it does belong in the top 20. Not just because it is one of those instances where it had a huge impact on a medium, but it's also a good movie. I think that says something. So,
is there any legit reason outside of not seeing this film for someone not to rank it in the top 100?
Legit reason? Not in the top 100? I don't think so.
Okay. Neil, thoughts on Snow White and everything that's been said so far?
Well, I don't think it's the best Disney film by a long shot, so I wouldn't put it in the top 20. I had it ranked somewhere around 50, and I think most of that was because of historical significance and just for being the first animated film ever. But when I look at the film, just the structure of it, I agree it is a simple film. I don't see it as convoluted at all. The problem I have with it is that the characters aren't very interesting. The motivation of the queen, Snow White, is another Mary Sue. And even the prince, he just kind of shows up at the end. He's like, yes, I am here. And the dwarves are probably the only sort of real characters in the movie that you can identify with. I think the version of this movie I would want to see is a commentary track with the Gremlins watching it. Just because I've seen this so many times, and I don't think it's a terribly interesting movie, but I think it's a movie that everyone should watch. And it's not a bad movie, but I don't think it belongs in the top 20.
So we definitely have some differing opinions all the way across the board. We have extreme hate on one hand, someone that thinks a couple of people that think it deserves to be in the top 20, someone that have it around 50. Steve, where do you fall on the spectrum?
I definitely see that it deserves to be in the top 100. I don't know if I would say that it. I would say in the latter end of it. It's more of those hi ho, off to hell it go type movies for me. So, but yeah, that's pretty much my opinion of it. I've seen it. I don't really care for it all that much.
So, one Disney princess followed by another as we've gone from Cinderella to Snow White. And just like that, there's only 15 spots left in the countdown. So let's see what starts off those 15 spots.
15.
I mean, if you've seen one Disney princess, you've seen them all, right? Maybe not so much. Coming in at number 15, a fairly more modern Disney princess. And one of the... Well, I'll get into my opinions on the film in a second. But coming in at number 15 is 1989's Little Mermaid. On 16 lists, 4 people left this off of their top 100 entirely. Rotten Tomato score of 91. Myself and one other of the contributors had it the highest ranked. I had it ranked number 3. 1,147 points, 1989's The Little Mermaid. I guess we can start with Mike, and I don't mean to back the bus and then go forward and then back again.
I honestly don't remember not ranking this.
You
I could have
you
had
ranked
enough.
Little Mermaid, both of the sequels,
No,
but
you must
not
have
the
misread
original.
that because no. You must have misread
I will
that
give you
because
your list.
the only sequel that I ranked was the second one. I didn't. I've never even seen Ariel's Beginning, so you must have misread
I will
that.
show you the email you sent to me. Anyways, so you meant to rank Little Mermaid somewhere in your 100?
It should have been wherever you said that second sequel was, because that wasn't what I would have never put Ariel's Beginning on a top 100 list.
All right, well, we'll have to just blame Mike for not being able to type things out properly, and
Or Kevin for reading stuff properly, like usual.
move on to Steve. Your thoughts on Little Mermaid, and does it deserve to be in our top 20? That's the question on all our movies, I guess.
That one's kind of difficult to answer just because I'd say that it's one of the better ones out of all those different Disney princess movies. The villain was actually halfway decent. The story somewhat halfway decent. I don't know. I would much rather watch this than the Disney films that have been listed in this episode so far, or some of the other ones that have managed to make the list.
I mean, for me, I love this film. I don't care that mostly when I was growing up, it was all females that loved this film, and there were some more male pointed Disney films to come after it. But to me, I loved this film. I loved the music. This was something we had never seen before. As far as my eyes, this is so far removed from what you expect Disney to be when you're growing up in the 80s and 90s, I guess, when you've seen all of the classic stuff and when you've seen the stuff from the 60s and 70s, and then you kind of went through this period in the, you know, late 70s, early 80s where it's like, oh, what is going on at Disney, I guess. And then all of a sudden 1989 comes and Little Mermaid just shatters all idea of what you picture Disney to be, and it goes on into this, whatever you want to call it. Some people have called it a Disney Renaissance or a rebirth or whatever you want to call what happened with Disney in the late 80s, early 90s. But this is the film that started that all, and it's kind of like in a different way, in a lesser aspect than what Dan was saying. You know, what if Snow White had failed? Obviously, that would have had different and more intense ramifications. But if Little Mermaid fails, uh, you know, not having some of the films that come right after it without naming them, you know, that definitely would be some type of an impact, because this started a run for a good almost 10 years of Disney success. And I don't know, I really love the film. I love the music. I love the characters. You know, just all of the different, especially the underwater characters that you get to see, the different types of, what do you want to call it, sea life, I guess. And the music overall, the music is phenomenal. So I love this film. I definitely think it deserves to be in our top 20. What about you, Dan?
I think so. You mentioned it. You know, it is the movie that brought Disney out of the brink, so you have to give it credit for there. And two, like with Snow White, I do. I mean, I do stand behind Snow White. Yes, maybe it's not the most complex or interesting, full of interesting characters, but I think Little Mermaid, certainly Ariel, is a lot more of an interesting character than that of Cinderella. You know, her desire for acceptance is something that's, I think, a lot more complex than that of just Prince save me type of behavior. Though we do kind of get that near the end, but I don't know. I, like you said too, I definitely think it belongs there. Great music, Under the Sea, a great song, of course. And two, I mean, just based on the amount of internet memes it made with some of its questionable animation, you know, and its possible sexual orientation with its VHS cover art back in the day. Certainly, it certainly started a trend there. But yeah, it's deserving of top 20. I think too, like Kevin, you mentioned you loved it as a kid. I think I was part of that group that was probably too scared to say they liked it, because it was a girly movie of that period. So but as a mature, or quote unquote mature adult, I can recognize it as the great film that it is.
And I think too, another thing that it does well that I think separates it a little bit from some of the other Disney films, I think, okay, yes, we're talking about mermaids, we're talking about people living underwater, we're talking about magical spells that take voices away, etc. so don't get what I'm about to say twisted. But it almost seems to me that from a character standpoint that you can almost relate more as a kid to Ariel than you can some of the other past Disney movies that are so enwrapped in kind of main plot lines based around this fantasy magical element. Like for me, when you think about like a Snow White or a Cinderella or some of those other ones, like it's harder to relate. Like Snow White is like, okay, she's a quote unquote beautiful person who a witch is uh, jealous of, so we're gonna have a spell, etc. Like that's here we have a character in Ariel who wants to know what else is out there, who's going against her, her father's wishes, who's dealing with falling in love and being, with someone that she's not supposed to fall in love with. I mean, it just seems to me like when you boil it down, there's more relatable, like concepts about this character that if you hit it at the right time in your life, you can relate to and you can connect to, even though, yes, we are under the sea, we're mermaids and etc. And we got Ursula and all this stuff. And Ursula is a pretty good Disney villain, by the way. But I don't know. I just think one of the reasons Little Mermaid was a little more successful was because of that ability for kids at that time to relate to different issues that she was going on. I'm not saying those issues are completely invisible in other Disney films, but sometimes there's a lot more magic and fantasy hiding some of that. But maybe I'm the only one that feels that way. Neil, how do you feel about Little Mermaid?
I agree. I mean, the analogy I was going to make is that this movie is like, what if Cinderella was motivated? I mean, Cinderella, if you watch Cinderella, she doesn't really do anything. She just kind of sits around and does chores and waits for somebody to save her. Whereas Ariel, like, actually goes out and, like, tries to accomplish things. She wants to get out and she wants to be free and walk on land and stuff. And she takes things into her own hands. And that was kind of cool. And also comparing her to Snow White, I mean, if the queen was willing to sacrifice her own beauty to get after Snow White, she might as well just put a gun in her mouth if she saw Ariel. This movie is much better as far as Disney princesses go, and it was like a huge renaissance back in the day because this was 1 year after Oliver and Company. I mean, not knocking that movie at all, but it was quite a leap. And the only other thing I have to say is that just a couple of weeks ago, the podcast Good Job Brain did an episode about this. So people listening to this, go listen to that.
I think if you were just to take kids that have never seen, these films, and you were to show them Oliver and Company, and then you were to show them Little Mermaid, and then you were to have them write down what year they thought each one was made, you would never have them put in those two films in the same decade.
Yeah. The thing about The Little Mermaid is I agree with everything Kevin and Neil have said. I mean, it's a movie about exploration, about, basically it's one of the first animated films I know of as far as the child trying to break away. I mean, it's kind of like when people said, oh, well, 90210 broke all these barriers with exploring situations on television that no one ever had done before. And this is one of those films that does that. So the film has come a long way.
You have completely blown my mind. You are the only person on the planet that could get a 90210 reference into a top 100 animated film podcast.
Hey, it's the truth. Just said it yourself. She is dealing with something that is completely,
I'm not saying it's bad or anything. I'm just saying.
And they did the exact same thing in 90210.
All right.
I mean, really, if you want to make another analogy, the one that you actually prefer, technically, she's doing the same stuff, some of the stuff that was done in Saved by the Bell.
I mean, I just love the fact that in the same discussion we had Dan talking about his fear of mentioning that he liked Little Mermaid when he was a kid to your outright professions in your knowledge of 90210. It's an interesting dynamic there.
What can you say?
All right. Well, Disney princesses have taken the countdown hostage. Let's see if their grasp around it can be broken with our next selection.
14.
Dan, it's just fun to put you on the spot. Is there a Disney princess we haven't talked about yet?
I'm sure there is.
This is all your fault.
Okay, well, coming in number 14 here on our list, it's 4 in a row here for the Disney princesses. They're teaming up on the countdown. This one's from 1959, and it is none other than Sleeping Beauty. On 16 lists, so a few less. Same as Little Mermaid, they were both on 16, but a few less than some of the other ones we've talked about previously. Got as highly ranked as number 2 on the list. So out of the 4 Disney princess movies that we've just talked about, Cinderella, Snow White, Little Mermaid, and Sleeping Beauty, Sleeping Beauty had the highest rank out of all of them at 2. And Rotten Tomato score of 91. Of course, 4 people did not rank this. I guess as we're doing this one, let's look back at what we've just had here with the 4 Disney princesses, and do we have them in the right order? Do they all deserve to be in the top 20? We started with Cinderella, went to Snow White, Little Mermaid, and now Sleeping Beauty. Let's start with Mike.
I'm really surprised that Sleeping Beauty made it in. I mean, we all know that Maleficent is one of the best villains ever, but I'm really surprised because I don't know if this is a film that a lot of people think about when they think about Top 100. Sure, 16 of our members did, but I don't know. This movie always felt like to me that it was something that people knew about in the back of their minds, but isn't something that you would think of when you think of a Disney princess. Yes, she is a Disney princess, but her storyline out of all the Disney princesses is probably the most dark.
Yeah, I can see that in a way, possibly. And interesting that you bring up Maleficent too. Talking about Disney villains, I agree. She is definitely one of the most imposing Disney villains, and mysterious and evil looking.
Especially when it's starring Angelina Jolie.
Not talking about that film yet. Neil, what are your thoughts on Sleeping Beauty coming in here at number 14, higher than Cinderella, Snow White, and Little Mermaid?
I don't know if I'd put it higher than Little Mermaid, but definitely I'd put this one higher than the other 2. I like this princess a lot better. Except that I'm blanking on her name. Was it Ariel?
No, it's
Little Mermaid.
Aurora.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I haven't seen this in a while, but yeah, I love this movie, even though it kind of falls into the same trap of not very interesting princess, but she has a little more screen time where she gets to develop. And I think what really drew me to this movie was Maleficent, because she is the first Disney villain that I actually thought was scary.
I will agree with that, and I was trying to say earlier when we were talking about Little Mermaid, Ursula is, like Kevin said, Ursula is another one. I would say she's kind of like the late 80s, early 90s most scary villain as far as Disney goes. But yeah, Maleficent she was by far, like, her villainy is just, it makes people speechless. It really does.
Well, if you think about it in a way, it's we've talked about some of Disney films and having like this vast array of characters that you can relate to and watch and enjoy. In Jungle Book, we rattle off a bunch of names, and you can do that with a couple different Disney films. When you look at this one, I mean, it is Maleficent, and then you have Sleeping Beauty, who obviously is sleeping for a good deal. You have a somewhat nondescript prince, and then you have your 3 fairies. So I mean, really, there's not a lot to choose from. It's really carried by the fairies and Maleficent. But
at least this prince did something in this film versus the other prince who basically did nothing other than just show up.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Work for it.
Dan, Neil was saying that he would rank this higher than Cinderella and Snow White, but not Little Mermaid. Where do you feel Sleeping Beauty falls amongst those?
I would probably agree with that. I don't, like I said, it just as on a historical importance perspective, I think I would maybe Sleeping Snow White a little higher, but I don't argue that Sleeping Beauty, just based upon the movie itself, is better. I would like the mix of fantasy with the animation. It's I think more complex, and it has a dragon in it, which is always a plus. So I think that is an interesting point, though, because when you're thinking about it, you have Maleficent. Wow, you have the villain in this, and thinking of character wise, it's not full of a lot of different characters or anything like that. But I don't think that makes it a bad movie, just on how it's designed. So I agree, though. I probably would have the Little Mermaid above it, just because I think that has more personality, and it's just a brighter movie.
A quick question for you, Dan. Number one, are you surprised? A two-parted question, I guess. Number one, are you surprised to see all four of these Disney princess films at the same time, all of them in the top 20? Or are you more surprised that we don't see one of them in our top 10?
I'm a little surprised we don't see one of them in the top 10. I'm not surprised they're all back to back to back like this. I think we've seen that a lot with different, that happening with a few times throughout the list. I think that just tells you how closely they relate, like they're ranked. Sometimes when I was making my list, it was hard to differentiate between them and choose an ordering. So I think what you ended up having a lot is people probably rank them within the same amount. So that's probably why they're like this. But yeah, I am surprised at least one of them doesn't make. I thought Snow White would have a chance at the top 10, just because, like you mentioned, Kevin, it's often ranked number one on a lot of lists. So,
and do you think there's people listening here, fans of one particular studio, that may be getting nervous that some of their favorite films are not on our countdown?
Either getting nervous or others getting nervous that it's only going to be those in the top 10.
You would guess that there possibly could be 10.
I still hold by that.
And we've gone through 7 spots on our countdown without seeing one. We'll see what lucky number 13 brings next.
13.
All right, I guess with number 13, the curse is broken. We will have our first Pixar film of the day. Coming in at number 13 is 2001's Monsters, Inc. The first film to break the 1,200 point mark. It was on all lists except for 2. Only 2 people left Monsters, Inc. completely off of their top 100. Nobody ranked it higher than 6, though. Rotten Tomato score of 96. If you were taking its average score, it probably would have gone somewhere in the upper 20s, lower 30s for us. But Monsters, Inc. is our first Pixar film of the day, and it comes in at number 13. Mike, your thoughts on Monsters, Inc.?
I love Monsters, Inc. for how different it is. It's basically taking something we've all probably had as a fear as a child and showing you that monsters are actually scared as well. Overall, the story is good. The animation is amazing. The friendship that you see in Mike and Sully is awesome. And the voice cast. I mean, John Goodman and Billy Crystal, who would have ever thought that those two would be a interesting team up? Not to say that they're not interesting actors at all. I'm just saying that those two voices for those two specific characters and how different they actually are. Absolutely loved it. And the casting of Steve Buscemi as the chameleon. Steve Buscemi plays some really slimy characters in his career, and Randall is by no means any exception. I absolutely love this movie, and I really did enjoy the prequel as well.
Question for you, if the date's right here. Monsters, Inc. came out in 2001, which is the same year that Shrek came out. Shrek came in at number 18. Monsters, Inc. came in at number 13. Is that an accurate saying of those two films?
Yeah, most definitely. Monsters, Inc. was a way better, interesting story overall.
Fair enough. Neil, your thoughts on Monsters, Inc., our first Pixar film today?
I left it off my ranking probably more due to a brain fart, because I just, as my list was winding down, I guess I just forgot about it. It's not exactly my favorite Pixar film, just because I don't know, it just never appealed to me. Maybe it's because of the casting. I mean, Billy Crystal. I'm one of those people where I could watch an hour of Billy Crystal and not laugh once. I don't know what it is. I just don't find him very funny. I do think it's a good film. The story's nice. The character of Boo is particularly appealing. A very cute character, but yeah, this one's up there with like A Bug's Life, where I didn't really like it as much as the other ones.
That's fair enough. You're allowed to not like something. Steve, fan of Monsters Inc. or not?
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the film. I like uh, Billy Crystal as far as the animation part of it is concerned, like with the vocals, and John Goodman in there and Steve Buscemi and everybody else. Um, I think that it was a pretty well done film. I believe at the time that it was pretty revolutionary with uh, the hair aspect of I think it was of Sully, of
Yeah.
how they animated it and everything. I believe at the time it was kind of revolutionary with the CG animation.
Mhm.
So I mean, it has that going for it, and also I just love the story altogether of them kind of being these scares and then having to, deal with the fact that oops, we let a human into scare world. So I find it really enjoyable. I ranked it in my 20s on my list, so I don't have a problem with it being here.
All right, your first of your 10 films, Dan. Monsters Inc. coming in at number 13. Your thoughts?
I do like it. I would not put it nearly this high. I think I would think more so in the 30s, maybe 40s or so. Uh, I don't think it's as I don't know. It's not the highest of Pixar by any means. Like Steve mentioned, some of the animation is incredible. I think even with lesser Pixar films, for the most part, the animation is usually always on point. But similar to Neil, I'm not a big Billy Crystal fan, and after watching him in the Oscars 2 years ago, not laughing at him for an hour is kind of an understatement. But uh, I do like John Goodman though, and like Buscemi as well. I do like the construction of the world and the concept about it. I think that's well handled, and just the idea behind it. And like Mike, I actually did too like the prequel. Not a huge amount. I probably wouldn't rank it in the top 100, but I thought it was fine and added a little bit more to this world of monsters. And I love this like the construction of all the different types of monsters and how they look and all their different characteristics and how they all have like their own unique set of skills and if it's like chameleon or whatnot. And also love Sasquatch. I thought he was a pretty funny character too.
All right, so there you have it, our first Pixar film of today's section of the countdown, and there's only a dozen spots left, and I think we're going to start off that dozen with, I'm not passing judgment one way or the other, but I will think if there's going to be a surprise somewhere in our top 20, it may be coming up next.
12.
All right, coming in at number 12 is a film from 2012. We had our Disney princesses. Let's go somewhere completely different with Disney. Number 12 on our top 100 is none other than Wreck-It Ralph. 1259 is the points on everybody's list except for 3 people. It was ranked number 1 by one of the panel members here.
Yep.
So another number 1 has fallen, so let's let him start. Are you disappointed that Wreck-It Ralph comes in at number 12, or are you just happy it's in the top 20?
I wish it would have been at least the other side of the top 10, maybe number 9. But for me, overall, and I know that we've said this before, oh, it's people ranking what's new and what's now. It has nothing to do with that, honestly. Wreck-It Ralph could have come out 10 years ago, and I would have still put it at number 1 for this list, for my personal list to go into the overall making of the master list, because of the simple fact of the story. That's really why I put it at number 1. The animation is great. The fact that it's one of, if not probably the best video game film ever made. As far as, we all know that video game movies in general are not very well made. But the story with this was really interesting. And it really makes you think about certain aspects of, changing your life or accepting who you are, or, wanting to, again, going back to the Little Mermaid, wanting to explore new things and get out and do something different. Sure, Wreck-It Ralph has a lot of cool video game homages and references and nods and everything else, but it it's just an amazing, amazing story, and that's why I put it at number one.
Steve, how did you like Wreck-It Ralph?
I ranked that number 4 on my list. But I'm pretty much in agreement with everything Mike just said.
All right, so some love on this end of the panel for Wreck-It Ralph. Let's see how it goes on the other end. Neil, Wreck-It Ralph deserves to be in our top 20?
Possibly. I had to be very careful about how I rank this just because I have such a video game bias anyway. I mean, I love it because of the references. Like, there was a scene in like the root beer tapper bar where I think there was a joke about how the bartender can only serve root beer now, and if you're a big video game aficionado, then you get that joke. But it's a good movie, and like I said, I was very careful about where I put it because I didn't want to put it too high, but I think it's in a good spot.
Okay, 3 people not having a problem with it being in our top 20. Dan, Wreck-It Ralph, deserving or not?
Everybody get the pitchforks ready.
I don't believe so by any means. I'll preface this by saying I did enjoy the film. When I wrote a review of it last year when it came out, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, which is definitely a stamp of approval. But 4 out of 5 stars is certainly not top 20 worthy. I think I ranked it in the 90s. And regarding, I find it interesting that with Mike that the Snow White you indicated it's convoluted, but you like the story with Wreck-It Ralph, because I would say the story with Wreck-It Ralph is supremely convoluted. I think that's where it lacks the most, is in the script standpoint. So much of it is devoted to establishing all these different rules of this world, and so unorganically telling them to you that it shows its hand way too early. It lets you
see. I didn't see that coming. I did not see, and spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the film yet, I did not see that ending coming with her actually using her glitch to her. I didn't even see that coming at all in the story.
It tells you, it sets up like all these different rules, like you can't die in your own game, or you can't leave your, like all these different moments that it just blatantly tells you that I don't know, maybe that's one specific moment it doesn't tell you, but it spends so much time, I think, establishing a world unnecessarily. I think you end up like wasting time with some of losing time with some of the characters. I think the basic story between the Ralph character and I forget the girl's name,
Penelope. Yeah, it is Penelope.
Like, I think that story within itself is good. I mean, Sarah Silverman, I never thought she would be able to be like actually remove some of her rawness as a comedian and actually give like a sweet voiceover performance. And I love John C. Reilly, and I think he's effective as well. But I do think people have a tendency to overrate this movie. I hate using the word overrated, but I think if you do remove many of the aspects of the fact that it's a video game and there's video game references, and I know it's making a joke here and that, and you remove those moments of it, I don't think people, if you took that story and placed it in a different world, people would be as highly, would think of it as highly. And now people just talk about, often when you hear people say, it's just like, oh, I loved all the cameos. I'm like, if a cameo makes your movie good, you don't have a good movie. I think Wreck-It Ralph is better than that. Like, I think a fair comparison is that like Roger Rabbit, where you have combining both, all these different elements of animation and Disney and Warner Brothers and whatnot. I think Roger Rabbit creates its world so much better. It tells its story, and it doesn't get caught up with just with the exposition the same way that Wreck-It Ralph does. So I don't disagree that it deserves in the top 100. I don't think it's a bad movie. But when you're talking about the best of the best, which we're talking about now, the animation of all time, or whatever you want, however you want to put it, I'm going to look at it more critically than I would if I'm just ranking it normally or just looking at it as on its own. So I may be coming off a little harsher, but that's more so because if you're going to, be placing it so high, I think you have to try to look at, is it as good as we're thinking it is, or simply does it appeal to us just simply based off premise?
I mean, I think it's unique. I enjoy the references and the cameos, and I think it's unique, and I think it's something different than what I had seen before. But I'm almost forced to agree with parts of what Dan is saying there, that I think if you remove a lot of that, when you're left with just the stripped down story, does that hold up on its own? I'm not sure. I know there was moments that I don't want to say this because I thoroughly enjoyed the film and I had it ranked number 37, but there were times during the film where it got a little long, or I almost even got bored. Um, but I still like the film. I still think it deserves to be in our top 100. I'm just saying, I think if there was one film in our top 20 that people may point to or may be surprised, it might be this one. But I do enjoy the film, so I don't want people think I'm hating on it. But I don't know top 20. Mike, defense, you had it number 1, so I'll give you another chance.
I mean, and I will say I did enjoy the video game references as well, but this is a movie that doesn't just throw them in your face. This is a movie where, as Neil said, some of them are hidden and you have to really kind of look for them. I mean, in that beginning scene with Grand Central or Gaming Central Station, um, a Sonic thing just kind of whizzes by the screen, or a Sonic, but it's not like boom here, product placement. As far as the story overall, I think it does hold up. Yeah, I'm sure there may be one or two spots where it's slow, but I never found myself being bored watching this movie. Um, I just didn't, because I didn't know what was going to happen, because these are two very different people from very different worlds, and sure, I will agree with Dan as far as more so not necessarily the plot with Penelope, but the plot with the villain. That was kind of beat over your head. I will agree to that point of, oh, hey, there's this guy back in the old days, and then there's this new villain now. Well, that's obvious. But as far as setting up the world, I disagree with Dan on that, because you have to set up the world and set up the twists, because you have to set up the world that much for the twist to come into play at the end. For them to say, no, screw the world, we're going to break the rules and see what happens.
But I think there's a way to build a world and not explicitly tell you the rules like out loud as much as it did. And it's one thing if it's like one or two things, but it's consistently throughout the movie. And I'm not saying the entire world building was not done well. I think there was a lot of great things, like the Grand Central Station, like you mentioned. I think that was a wonderful scene. That idea, just in how it's all connected with the extension cords and stuff like that. I think that was done creatively, and the group of all the different characters getting together, the villains, like Anonymous Month or whatever thing they had. So yeah, there are elements of world building that are done well. It's when they get into the specific rules and how things work, and things get kind of lost. And it's within that for me. I like I said, if I'm gonna be ranking this at a certain point, I do think you have to look at, is this something we are ranking because it deserves it, or is it something that it's just appealing to a certain audience, and that audience is us?
All right. Well, we'll have to let the listeners cast their votes, I guess, as far as the debate on Wreck-It Ralph's deservingness on being in our top 20 or not. But soon the discussion will change to, does it deserve to be in our top 10? Because there's only one more spot on this side of our top 10. So let's see what that last spot is.
11.
Well, there's one place we haven't been yet today on our countdown, and that is the decade of the 90s. We have not been there today, so let's go there now, and that will be for our number 11 spot, and that goes to 1999's Pixar film, sequel time, Toy Story 2. It was on 18 lists. Only 2 people left it off of their list, which I think is a little more fair to leave something off a list when you have a series of multiple movies from the same franchise. I'm not going to give people a hard time for that. It was the highest it got ranked was number 2. A Rotten Tomato score of 100. We haven't seen a lot of those, but it did have a 100 score on Rotten Tomatoes. 1,262 points for another Pixar film here. Toy Story 2 coming in at number 11. Let's start with Neil on this one. Toy Story 2 being in our top 20.
I think this is the least favorite of the 3 movies for me, just because I don't know. This one, like most Pixar movies, it's a good movie, but it it didn't really resonate with me as much as the first and the third one did. I've only seen it a couple times. Like I said, like Blanchard said earlier, I didn't exactly go and watch every single movie that I've ever seen for this video, so for this list. So I'm a little fuzzy on the movie itself. So I can't really say much more about it than that.
Steve, you didn't have this one ranked. Is it more so just because that there are 3 in this franchise, so one of them you decided to leave off, or do you not care for this one? What's your opinion on Toy Story 2?
Well, I enjoy all 3 of them. Some of them to more degrees than others. I just didn't find the second film to be as emotionally charged as the other 2. I didn't find myself as connected or as caring towards the story or the characters. Was it good? Yeah, it was good, but to me, the first and the third are actually stronger films overall than this one.
Mike, agree, disagree?
This film was an attempt to, sure, it brings in the continuity of the first film, and you see that time has passed, and you see that Buzz and Woody are getting along now and everything else, and now they basically had to pick, hey, which character are we gonna have go on a solo adventure? The best thing about the Toy Story films, outside of the plots of the first and the third film, is when they do the animation with the toys, where you think it's, oh hey, what's this adventure, and then at the end of it you flash out and it's actually Andy playing with the toys. With this one, it's like, hey, let's have Woody have an origin story. Toy Story Origins Woody, great. I liked it. I found it enjoyable. But I do tend to agree that it's not the best out of the 3. It's not a bad film, as Steve said. I find it interesting that Newman is the villain in this. Wayne Knight is the voice of Al. I enjoy it. Does it belong right before we get to the top 10? Probably not. I would probably put this, like, I don't know, maybe, I don't even remember where I ranked it, but somewhere around maybe 15 or 16.
Well, if we were trying to get 10 Pixar films in today, we had to get to some more very soon, or we were going to run out of spots for Dan. So,
yeah, I appreciate it, I guess.
Dan, number 11, Toy Story 2. Does it deserve to be in our top 20?
I kind of echo pretty much what I would have even said already. I don't think so. Top 20, no. Just because, like, I don't know. To me, I'd rather see other films that, like, a Spirited Away or something like that. It's kind of like the similar, if you can kind of compare it to like Lord of the Rings. It's like the 2 towers of the franchise, where the first and the third one are so much better that it's hard to lose sight of what's good about the second one, and the fact that it's within its own, it works, it's effective. And I think what hurts it a little bit is the fact that a lot of the themes it goes after in the second one are done better in the third one. So, and I think that's where it gets a little bit lost. And like Neil, I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I mean, I think Mike brought up a good point that the Toy Story world is best when those characters are like their interaction towards one another. So I think not having one of the major characters within that interaction hurts it a little bit. But I was not really for the idea of doing a Toy Story sequel when it came out. I think the result proved that Pixar could do sequels right. And when it added additional characters, I think those additional characters were actually interesting. And that's often not the case when you get sequels that bring in new characters. A lot of times the new characters are bring the movie down, but at least that didn't happen. So I would say definitely not in the top 20, top 30, 40, top 50, yes, but at least it's getting me closer to being right. So points right there.
That's true. And that means it's time that we only have 10 spots remaining on our countdown. And I will mention that there are 12 of our contributors or people that submitted lists that have not seen their number 1 film yet. So 12 people have not seen their number 1 film yet. There are 10 spots remaining. And we need how many more Pixar films? We need eight more Pixar films to reach Dan's prediction. So let's see what the top 10 brings us.
10.
I don't know, I can feel people listening getting nervous. Will their favorite films show up in our countdown? Well, we're not concerned with that. We're only concerned with making Dan right. So with number 10, let's go to another Pixar film. Starting off our top 10, we're going to go to the year 2003. We will see one person's number one ranked film fall, as we will with every film in the top 10 except for one. Every film in our top 10 was ranked number one by somebody except for one. This is not it. It was a Rotten Tomato score of number 99 on there. 2003's Finding Nemo is number 10 on our list. We've also passed the 1,300 point mark. Maximum point total 2,000. This is at 1,308. Finding Nemo at number 10 in our top 10. So the discussion shifts now. Does it deserve to be in our top 20? No. Does it deserve to be in our top 10? Dan, start us off here.
Oof, that's so hard. It's hard without even thinking of what else is on the top 10 to see if it deserves or not. Just thinking off the top of my head, I don't believe I ranked it in the top 10. So I would say no, but top 20, I don't have I agree. I think it belongs there. I think this is a good area where like Pixar, I think, was even turning the table and becoming more and more acclaimed. Like, I don't think this is the best Pixar movie, but I think this is when they entered a new territory. The animation got even better. The story, the scope of the story might be one of their biggest ones just in what they do. And again, a lot of great characters. And I thought like Ellen DeGeneres in this was hilarious. I'm not always her biggest fan, but I did find her funny in this. And Sharkbait, that character I thought was interesting, and Willem Dafoe with his voice acting. So I think overall the voice acting cast is strong as well. And I don't know, I thought it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of heart to it. You know, this fish trying to go and find its it's his son. There's something to that, and it's a cute movie too. I mean, gotta give it points for that. And I just remember people buying fish, the Nemo fish, forever. And I think most kids, when they see that fish, if you go to any aquarium, you're gonna see people calling it the Nemo fish. I think it's basically changed its name because of this movie.
Steve, love for Finding Nemo is a top 10 worthy film.
Yeah, I can see that. It's one of Pixar's stronger films. And something I've kind of noticed is if Pixar has a strong film, it either A, never gets a sequel, or B, it takes them a while to get the sequel.
Let's all go find Dory next year.
That's my point.
That's over 10 years later.
Yeah, that's what my point is. I mean, look at that. And Toy Story 2 isn't nearly as good as Toy Story 3, which had a big gap between them. Or, you know, like Incredibles, where that's never had a sequel, or, you know, stuff like that. And then you look at things like Cars, and you have Cars 2, and then Planes, it gets progressively worse. So, no, I see that this film is deserving of it. I like the voice cast. I like a lot of the jokes. I like the part where Ellen is Dory and forgetting everything that's going on in the story, and it's you get the all the fish in the dentist's office.
Yeah, it definitely has
so I mean, it's the film is very funny, but it's entertaining for all ages.
Neil, Finding Nemo, should it be in our top 10?
This is going to get progressively hard because I want to steer clear of hyperbole, but it's hard to say no. Personally, I did not put it in the top 10, or even the top 20, but that's because there's so many great films, and it's just hard to like put them in an order when you get this far up the countdown. But this is a very good film, and I think the thing with Pixar and sequels is that I don't think Pixar really likes doing sequels, or at the very least, they don't want to do a sequel unless there's a story to be told. And I think in a couple spots they were contractually obligated, and that's how we got Toy Story 2 and Cars 2. And whereas I think with Finding Dory, I think we're going to find that they actually have a story that's worth seeing. So I'm looking forward to that. About this movie, though, Um, yeah, I love the fish tank and the dentist's office. Every character in this movie is great. Um, Especially Ellen DeGeneres as Dory, and just I would never have thought of her as being a primed to be a voice actress, but she did a great job. Even Albert Brooks, I'm not the biggest Albert Brooks fan, but he was fantastic in this. So yeah, it definitely. I would not begrudge it for being on a top 10. I maybe wouldn't have put it in there myself, but I would not object at all.
And interesting to see. I'll save that thought for another second here. But Mike, did you say anything about Finding Nemo yet?
Finding who?
Finding Nemo.
I I've seen this in bits and pieces. I've never actually seen it all the way through, and I know a lot of people do love the film. And I was one of those people that when the craze hit, like a lot of things, and I'll admit to this to a lot of things. Um, when the Animaniacs craze hit back in the '90s, I steered clear. I didn't enjoy Animaniacs until I got older. Same thing with Finding Nemo when all this merchandise and all this, I guess you could say, infamy about it kind of hit. I was like, okay, I'll wait. I'll wait till all that's died down. So I'll have to check this one out eventually.
All right. Well, we start off our top 10 with Finding Nemo from Pixar, and Dan hopes to see seven more Pixar films. Let's see if we can make that happen.
9,
Some interesting things that we'll bring up as far as these two coming back to back, not seeing they're directly related outside of the company that produced them. So Dan scores another one. Number 9 is Pixar's film from 2008, and that would be Wall-E. It was on the exact same number of lists as Finding Nemo. They were both on 17 lists. It was just a tiny bit higher ranking. We haven't talked about limited rank at all, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to confuse people. But it's basically if you were just to rank amongst the lists that they're listed on. I find it interesting. Finding Nemo and Wall-E would come in 14th and 13th, right next to each other, just like they do with this version of ranking them 10th and 9th. Another number 1 falls. Michael Wilson and as well as one of our contributors both had it number 1, so it was the first film we've seen that 2 people ranked as their number 1 film. Rotten Tomato score of 96, but 3 people did leave off of their list completely. Wall-E in comparison to Finding Nemo, Mike.
Again, this is another one I resisted for the longest time. I finally did watch it. And the first 5 or 10 minutes, I was like, why do people see this as one of the best Pixar movies? After a while and after multiple viewings, I do like it. I do enjoy the story of it. Um, Thankfully, at this point in time in our lives, not the entire planet hasn't become overweight slobs, but I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny, just kind of basically poking fun at how lazy humans can be. I enjoy Wall-E. Is it a movie I go back to often? Not really, but I enjoyed it.
Steve, are you a Wall-E fan? Have you seen it, and does it deserve to be in our top 10?
Yeah, I actually have it on Blu-ray. This one I had as my number 5, so I definitely see it as being in the top 10. It's kind of odd for me to like a film like this, considering a lot of the dialogue is not human. It's all inferred over beeps and sounds. So, um, I too kind of resisted it when it came out initially, and then my wife and I rented it and ended up buying it because we really liked it. Um, the story's really strong between showing the civilization thing, and it's kind of funny because you get the live action scene in there at a point of the president evacuating the planet. I think it was Fred Willard or something. Uh, but no, the voice cast is pretty strong in it. The animation's cool. I like the futuristic concept. So I mean, I would say that it's definitely a strong film.
All right, Neil, top 10 worthy?
Awful. No, I love this movie. Yes, it is top 10 worthy, and that's where I put it. I had it at number 8. So yeah, this is an excellent movie, and I actually do like that for the first, I don't know how many minutes of the movie, there was basically no dialogue. I mean, obviously there were words, but you had to infer what was going on more than anything. But yeah, I love there's just such a, I think Pixar is really they like to challenge themselves. And I think with this movie and another movie that starts out with a lot of no dialogue, they were trying to really stretch their legs, stretch their animation, trying to get you to care about characters without like leaning on the actors so much. So I think this was an experiment that really paid off for them, and I I'm kind of stumbling, but I don't know what else to say. It's such a good movie, and I think it definitely deserves to be in the top 10.
Well, I guess what surprises me the most is I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Wally. I've never heard anybody just that hates it, that dislikes it, that just despises it, or not even that, but I not even hear people that say like nitpick little things about it. Now, we did have 3 people that left it off the list completely. Should I assume that they just haven't seen it, Dan?
Well, I do think there are some people that have major issues with the second half of the movie. When like the social commentary on it gets a little bit on the nose for some people. I necessarily don't agree with that, but I know usually the criticism I hear the most is that like once you bring in like the dialogue and you actually have human characters, it might be a little bit too much, like Mike mentioned, just like with like talking about just how overweight and lazy humans become, and so I think that might be a reason they left off, or it could be because they don't or they haven't seen it. For me, again, like Neil, like everyone's mentioned, it's 100% deserving of the top 10. One of the best Pixar movies ever, bar none. Pixar has a unique ability to tell you so much without dialogue and just through facial expressions and body language. And that's so much true in Wall-E. Like we've mentioned, the first, I think it's 45 minutes. Honestly, I don't know how long for sure, but I believe it's near that, where you have no actual dialogue, and you just learn about this character Wall-E just through his actions, just through his uh, how he goes through his everyday task, and just like weird looking eyebrows and whatnot. And plus, like Steve mentioned, putting Fred Willard as president should qualify you for the top 10 immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, so and I think one of the better love stories, if you want to call it love story or friendship between Wall-E and Eve. I mean, it's a wonderfully told, and there's so much heart there. When I talked about Wreck-It Ralph, not to keep harping on it, like I talked about how that gets unnecessarily complicated. To me, if you look at Wall-E, it shows you how you can you can say so much without even speaking the words, and it's a hard skill. It's really hard to do. So it's 100% deserving a top 10. I think arguably top 5. So
I will say that I think like the third or the fourth or the upteenth time it's been on like Disney Channel or ABC Family or whatever else after I had seen it on DVD. Well, the first time I remember seeing it, I was like, hey, they made Johnny Five a midget. What the hell? And then as I watched it more over the last couple of years since its release, I'm thinking, hey, Wally and Eva, or Eve, or whatever, because he says her name is Eva, they're basically Johnny Five and Ali Sheedy is what they are.
God.
Shut up. You know you like Short Circuit.
Alrighty then. So, Pixar trio so far to help Dan out here when we had Toy Story 2 backed up against Finding Nemo and now Wall-E. So apparently we need some more. Let's see. We're running out of spots here, guys. Let's see what's next.
8.
All right. So at number 8, another number 1 falls. As we said, all of them except for one are number 1s. But I don't think the person that had this ranked number 1 will be as upset to see it at least making our countdown. Number 8 on our list from 1999 is The Iron Giant from Warner Brothers. 1,348 points. It was on everybody's list except for 2 people's. Mr. Wilson, what are you thinking? TV's Mr. Neil had it ranked number 1, limited rank of 15. So coming in at number 8 is the Iron Giant. We'll let you start, Neil.
Okay, you've all been spared eye pokes.
Yes.
This movie is phenomenal. I mean, I do understand that it has some weaknesses, but I think it makes up for it just pure charm. Because they basically took this concept that was like, what if Optimus Prime was Winnie the Pooh? And basically this boy finds a giant, this big iron giant, and befriends him, and it's basically just a friendship story. And you never find out where the giant comes from, but there's some sort of ominous hint about that he may have been an invader or something, but he hits his head at the beginning of the movie, and so he loses his memory. So he's basically like a big puppy now. So, and it's a movie that's all about being who you want to be, which is a theme that I like, and we see it in a couple other films, particularly a Pixar film that I also hope is in the top 10. It's a Brad Bird movie. It's really, really cute. I love this movie, and like I said, it's got a couple hokey spots, but I think the characterization saves it, and that's about all I have to say.
Dan, since you were spared the eye poke that you were so worried about before, your thoughts on Iron Giant being in our top 10?
I 100% agree with what Neil was saying. It's deserving top 10, 100%. It's such a wonderful story, like was mentioned. I just love the animation to it too of the giant. He looks so classical in a way, and just his design. And I don't want to say steampunk because that's not right at all, but I don't know, just in how he's all put together is just interesting to me. And to me, this is like Brad Bird doing Spielberg better than Spielberg can do at times, because there is such an heart to it and such an earnestness with that relationship between the boy and the giant, which is wonderful. And probably the best Vin Diesel performance ever. So there is that as the voice of the giant. But yeah, great movie, great animation, and probably one of, if not the best, Brad Bird movie.
All right, Mike, your thoughts on the Iron Giant?
Neil said, mash Optimus Prime and Eeyore together, and you get Xander Cage. I could not believe, like, when this movie first came out, I'm like, Vin Diesel does voiceover? Really? Wow. But no, I love this movie. I think this is a really, really great movie. I think the aspirations of being something greater than what you are, like in the movie, like Hogarth uses the example of Superman, which is kind of funny because the giant is from some unknown world, so it's technically this is a Superman movie. The animation is great. I was kind of surprised with the voice cast of Aniston and Harry Connick Jr. Jennifer Aniston and Harry Connick Jr. as the mother and the junkyard artist. I like it. I think it's really cool. The animation is top notch. It's just an all around great movie, and everyone needs to at least see this once.
Steve, we haven't got your thoughts. Iron Giant, deserving or not of being in our top 10?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The animation in it was really good. I like the story. The fact that it's giant robots and it's got almost that ET kind of vibe to it is kind of cool. No, I mean it's definitely a strong film. I don't have any problems with it.
All right, so we got something that wasn't Disney and wasn't Pixar into our top 10, so the crowd should rejoice for that, although it hurts Dan's odds a tiny bit.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can get right back to Pixar or if we have somewhere else to go for our next slot.
7.
All right, coming in at number 7. I'm sorry, Dan, but it's not from Pixar. Number 7 is a film also from the 90s, just like Iron Giant. This time it's from 1991. We're going back to the wonderful world of Disney for Beauty and the Beast. The first film to break the 1,400 point mark, but it was only on 16 people's list. So those 16 people ranked it darn high. In fact, if you were just to do our rankings based on the films that it was, the list that it was appearing on, it would have been our number 2 film on our countdown. So only one film was ranked higher if you just took the list that it appeared on. 2 people ranked it number 1, 92 Rotten Tomatoes score. Number 7, Beauty and the Beast. Mike, your thoughts on it coming in our top 10 and maybe in comparison to the other Disney princess films we talked about earlier in today's episode?
I like Beauty and the Beast. It's a movie that I think is a little overhyped. It is a good movie. It is a good story. It's good animation. Again, it's one of those Disney movies that the side characters are more so the interesting part of the film. Because if you took those side characters away, it's basically just, rooting Batman and Vicky Vale. It's really what it is. But
you're no longer allowed to make references for the rest of the episode.
Shut up. It's true though. Overall, I enjoyed it. Is it something I watch on a regular basis? No, not really. I do like the arguments between, I think it's Mr. Clocksworth and whatever. I forget what the candle's name is off the top of my head because yeah, I do like their back and forth. I thought that was really cool. As far as regards to the other films, I enjoy the other films more than this, but I still do enjoy this for what it is.
But not top 100 worthy?
I don't know. I just think it's not for me because if I was to go back and redo my list, maybe somewhere in the 60s, but I don't know. It just wasn't something that, sure, the animation's great, the music is great, the story's good, but it just wasn't something that I thought of to put on here.
Do you think this is, I'm not trying to rake you over the coals here.
Yes, you are.
Do you think this is inferior to the multiple Disney sequels that you did rank in your top 100?
No. But at the same time, I've seen all of those more than I've seen this. I've seen this maybe a total of 5 times since it came out.
I'm speechless. Anyway, Neil, Beauty and the Beast, not in our top 100 or not in our top 10. It comes in at number 7. Your thoughts?
I wouldn't have put it in the top 10. This falls under the brain fart category because somehow I didn't list it. I don't know how that happened. It's an okay Disney movie. I've kind of mixed feelings about it because it is kind of like a Stockholm Syndrome type movie, just because the Beast is holding Belle captive, but she's also falling in love with him, which is kind of weird. But it is what it is. I mean, and of course, it also kind of hurts that she's like the smartest of all the Disney princesses. She's a bookworm.
Or is that what it is? Is she just that smart that she found a way to not get killed by the Beast?
I'll take it.
By tangling this whole love story up in it.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good movie. I don't know. I wouldn't have put it in the top 10. Maybe like 30s.
Fair enough. And I kind of do maybe I'll give you guys a chance to comment again, and Dan and Steve can comment while they make their first comments. But interesting too to see that we had a slew of Disney princess films come back to back when we talked about Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and even Little Mermaid all in a row, and now Beauty and the Beast was somewhat separated from that pack. So think about that for a minute. Steve, your general thoughts on Beauty and the Beast coming in on our top 10?
I kind of have to agree with Neil. I mean, one, I forgot it too somehow, brain fart. But I don't see it as top 10, but I definitely see it beating everything else that was in the beginning of the episode. uh, I mean, I find it enjoyable, and the songs in it are pretty good, and then the animation's good. So I mean, it's a fairly memorable film, and very likable. I mean, I've seen it more times than I care to count, but that's more so because my wife really likes it. So, um, it's yeah. I mean, I definitely see it being in the top 20.
I think it has some things going for it. It has some things going against it. It is coming out in an era of just phenomenal Disney films, and I think sometimes it can get lost in the shuffle there with the other three that come around it, even though it outranked The Little Mermaid on our list. I think it has, like you said, the side characters are very interesting. All the people and objects that she comes into contact, especially once she's in the Beast, whatever you want to call it, castle, palace, whatever. It has that going for it. It has some good music, as do all the Disney films from this era. It has a Disney princess who, well, I guess about any way you put it would probably be, she'd have to rank as one of the best as far as if you were trying to find like the ideal princess to marry. I mean, she's gorgeous. She's intelligent. She's definitely got a lot going for her. She can sing. I don't know. So you got to, yeah, yeah. You know, she'll let you kidnap her and not press charges. So I mean, you got that going for you. I think what for me it falls a little short on is in the main villain, perhaps. I don't know who else or what other kind of awesome villain you could have had, and it wouldn't have worked with this story. But Gaston, in comparison to other Disney villains, doesn't rank very high. So I guess if you were trying to nitpick, I could point that out. I am surprised that it's somewhat separated from the rest of the Disney princesses, especially Little Mermaid. Dan, what do you think?
I guess I may be alone here, but I had it in my top 10, and I think it is deserving. Regarding the villain aspect, I guess to me, the villain in this or the conflict in this is not necessarily one of an outside character, but it's all it's that
True
personal journey of the Beast. Like the Beast is his own worst enemy in this, and I mean I do give it points for if you look at a lot of the Disney princess movies. It's often the princess being saved. It's the princess changing who she is in the case of like Little Mermaid in order to fit into another world. But this is a case where it's the princess or the beauty, like you said, only the beauty can save the Beast. It's the beauty is the one who is actually, in some ways, the hero in it because she is bringing the Beast around. So on that standpoint, I think it stands a little bit above the other Disney princess movies. I also think the animation is fantastic. A lot of the musical set pieces, are grandiose, huge, and wonderful. A lot of the side characters, like you mentioned, also just a lot of the design to the character. I remember loving. I still do. I love the design of the Beast. There have been a lot of different interpretations of that story of Beauty and the Beast, and I think the Disney's version of it or Disney's design of it is one of the best. And not that this means anything or not that this is a huge deal, but you have to give it somewhat credit for being the first animated movie ever nominated for Best Picture. And that's back when there's only 5 of them. Again, like Academy Awards aren't everything, but I think that does say something about what it was at the time it came out. So, I don't know. To me, it is deserving of the top 10.
And I think it's the, you mentioned versions of Beauty and the Beast. It's the best version of this story I've ever seen. I actually did have it ranked, and I don't want to say that I was just surprised that it was not so far, but somewhat removed from those other ones. I figured they would all be lumped together somewhat. But I had it ranked in my top 10 as well. I think I had it like 8 or 9. So I'm fine with it being in our top 10. Mike or Neil or Steve, anybody have another thought on Beauty and the Beast that they wanted to share?
It's one of the few that have had spin-offs but not sequels. There was Enchanted Christmas, which I guess could really be considered a sequel, but it didn't. Again, it For me, in sequels, sometimes, if specifically to Disney, if it doesn't have the number 2 or Roman numeral 2 in it or any kind of numbering in it, it doesn't really consider it to be a sequel, even though it is. They did have Enchanted Christmas. They did have a couple of other things. What interests me most about the Disney stuff is more so how they can, or how they did put everything together in House of Mouse. As far as all of the classic villains and characters being in the audience. As far as Beauty and the Beast, it is worthy of top 10. I probably would put it lower, though, personally.
Fair enough. So Dan, just if we were keeping track of our ongoing nonsense, you need Pixar to run the table now.
Hey, if I'm wrong, I'll be
You're
happy
going
to be
down.
wrong.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to be wrong.
I'm going to be upset with the next one. I'm just going to show my hand early. But,
oh, jeez.
Oh, well. We'll see what that is.
6.
I say I'm going to be upset. I'm not really upset. I mean, it's number 6 at least. But, yeah, my number 1's going down now, too. And that will be our number 6 film on the list. We're staying with Disney. We're going 1 year into the future, 1992's Aladdin. One person decided that this was not top 100 worthy. One individual left it off of their list entirely. But we'll get more into that individual's rankings maybe in the wrap up. 1,500, over 1,500 points. So out of the possible 2,000, 1,522 on 19 list, 92 Rotten Tomato score. If we were doing a limited rank, it would have came in number 10, but it comes in at number 6. I was the only one that ranked at number 1. I love just about everything about this film. It contains my favorite Disney princess, probably, and Jasmine. She's amazing. And no, I'm not attracted to animated people. Robin Williams as the genie is quite possibly one of the greatest characters in animation history as far as animated films. In my opinion, he was ridiculously on top of his game as this role. There's not a kid that saw this film that was not laughing and in love with the genie. So you have that going for it. Not my favorite Disney villain by far. I not a huge Jafar fan, but he is a pretty I don't know, badass Disney villain. I mean, he's got a lot of power. He becomes some crazy powerful stuff on genie power and etc. So you got that. You got like the magic carpet. You got Abu. I loved Aladdin as a character, and I think one thing that really got Aladdin for me was when you're a kid growing up and you've seen all the Disney classic movies and you've seen Cinderella and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and all these characters we've talked about previously. And then you have a bunch of movies where the main characters are, it seems like they're animals or they're something like that, like Dumbo and Bambi and, even with like Aristocats and Robin Hood's animals and Jungle Book's basically animals. And then Aladdin finally comes around, especially right after Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. And you have one of the main characters is a human male. And I don't know, for me, that resonated growing up. And I loved the voicing of him. I love the music in this. I think his moment when he's singing the Riff Raff part, Riff Raff Street Rat, and just being able to somehow see him as this person who is gets to try to experience both sides of it, being a lowly, person being chased as a criminal to, being married to a princess, etc. I don't know. There's a lot to love about this movie. I had it ranked number 1, but I will get off my soapbox and let someone else talk. Dan, what do you think about Aladdin?
If I were going to talk about my favorite Disney movie of all time, it is actually my favorite, just personally, but it's not the one I rank the highest, just because I don't think it's necessarily quality-wise the best one. Like you mentioned, as a kid, we watched this, or it was on TV the other day, and it's one of those movies I just know word for word. I've watched it so many times, just every single line just comes to me. Again, so many great songs. You talked about the characters. I mean, the animation too. I love it got me right away when you see that the head of the, I guess you would say, tiger or whatever it is.
Cave of Wonders, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was amazing. That hooked me in, and I've been hooked ever since. Magic carpet, so much great humor, and it also was one of the best Disney Sega Genesis games I've ever played in my life. So major points for it there. So yeah, I 100% deserving of top 10. So I, like you, Kevin, share your love of this movie.
Excellent. Neil, Aladdin, good or bad?
Good movie. I didn't rank it that high, but it's of the 90s Disney films, or at least the early 90s Disney films, this might be my least favorite. But it's good. Yeah, Robin Williams is not exactly my favorite comedian, but he was funny in this movie, so I'll give him credit for that. I liked the voice of the parrot, which was Gilbert Gottfried. Yes, I think he stole the movie. I loved that character, just because it's I shouldn't even call it a character, because it just is Gilbert Gottfried, just totally bleeding over the character and being himself. The aristocrats. So yeah.
Nice.
And a healthy dose of Frank Welker in here as well.
Oh yeah.
2 healthy doses, actually.
Disrupts my slumber.
That was eerily good.
Lots of practice.
Yeah. You should practice that more than Megatron now. Yeah, Aladdin. Okay. Let me see here. I'm trying to remember. I did not actually get to see this in theaters, which is a damn shame. We were, and I don't know if it's still like this nowadays, because I go to only matinee showings now. But back in '92 when this came out, we were my dad, my aunt, and my cousin and I were gonna go see this in the theater. The theater was like, I don't know, 5 blocks away from where we were living. And the line stretched for 4 of the 5 blocks. Literally, the line was around the corner of the building and down the street to get in to see this film. It had that much. It was that anticipated. And like Dan said, everything about this movie, and like you said, Kev, everything about it is really, really, really cool. Yeah, Jafar isn't technically, magically, he's probably the best out of all the Disney villains. Outside, I would say he's, like, if we were doing awards, he's the best male Disney magician on the evil side. And of course, his sadly not former wife Maleficent would be the female version. But I don't know, this movie. Yes, it's Robin Williams. Yes, it has great songs. It has a great plot. I see the Sultan now in so many different king roles. How stupid the Sultan was in this movie. And Neil is right. Gilbert Gottfried the Parrot really kind of stole the show in this. He really, really did.
For me, the genie stole the show, but I can see that.
Well, okay, but on the villain side, who you gonna be more enjoyable to see, Jafar or Iago? I mean, Jafar really, if you.
Well, the thing that Jafar did good, though, he was a villain that you it was honestly creepy and you didn't want to see, and you believe he's a villain 100%. I'm not saying he's my favorite villain, but he is a villain. Like,
oh yeah.
I don't know. That sounded stupid, but like he is like what you want from a villain, someone that you don't want to be seen at all and that creeps you out.
And yeah, you're right, the genie. I mean, Robin Williams, his comedy, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. What I love about that guy is almost everything I've seen him in, he's using a million different voices. And the genie is no exception.
It was a perfect showcase for him, and how many quotable lines is there from this that the kids would just like repeat and repeat and repeat.
Wasn't he also, I'm trying to remember, I'm gonna have to look it up. Didn't he also do a second role? Wasn't he the guy in the beginning?
Yeah. The guy selling the stuff.
The narrator.
And that character was supposed to be the genie, but they changed the ending.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Steve, you haven't got to talk, I don't think, about Aladdin, have you?
No.
What do you think about it?
I love this film. It's one of the few classic, or if you can consider it classic. Well, technically it is because it's all CG now. Uh, Disney films that I find myself going back and watching over and over and never getting bored of. I really love the especially now I go and I sit and I can pick out different voices like Jim Cummings, Frank Welker, all these different voice actors I'm starting to pick up on because I know who they are. But I love the story, the animation, the music. Of course, Gilbert Gottfried in his um, Iago role, and then Robin Williams is the genie. I love every aspect of this film. Uh, it's I ranked it at 12 on my list. But I definitely like it where it's at. So I have no problem with where it's at.
Who would have thought that wasn't one the kid from Full House doing the voice of Aladdin? Is that right? Is that the right show that he was on?
Growing Pains, I think.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I too. We used to talk about the songs a lot. A Whole New World and One Jump Ahead, and I don't know. There was a lot of good music in here. But again, that was prototypical for that time period of Disney. And then we are left with 5 spots remaining on our countdown. Dun dun dun.
5.
So although we can't get to the number Dan predicted, we can get close. Let's start with number 5 from Pixar from 2004, and that movie is The Incredibles. Again, one person left this off of their list, and that was it. It was ranked number 1, as are most of the films we've been talking about. 1,533 points, just edging out Aladdin by about 10 points or so, 11 points. Number 5 on our list, The Incredibles. Dan?
Amazing. Probably it's I don't know if I put it up number 5, but top 10, top 15, I don't have an issue with it. A lot of great characters. Again, I love how it takes a lot of the tropes of the superhero genre and flips them on their head. It's kind of like the best Fantastic Four movie you're probably ever gonna get. Though it's not necessarily Fantastic Four. Just it's that dynamic is similar in some ways. But yeah, I love to like some of the action sequences in this are so well done and so well handled, and the different use of powers and whatnot. It's also really funny. I mean, I think because of Incredibles, people look at capes a lot differently in superheroes. And yeah, exactly. So yeah, I love The Incredibles. I don't know if I would. Number 5 is tough just because it's hard for almost any movie when you get up this high, but I don't have an issue with it being in top 10 though.
Mike, are you a fan of the film? Have you seen it?
Incredibles, I've seen it over and over and over again.
All right.
I love this movie. It's interesting to me the path that Jason Lee has taken as an actor, because he voices the villain Syndrome in this. Overall, I pretty much, which is probably shocking to a lot of people, the world might be about to break, because I pretty much agree with Dan. I mean, it's overall amazing film. Neil should be snickering at that world about to break.
Yes.
The voice cast is amazing. The plot is cool. You have 2 children, one who is skeptical about her powers, and the other one in Dash who wants to just embrace them. That's an interesting dynamic. You have I guess you could say, overweight insurance salesman, kind of down on his luck kind of guy, trying to get back in the game because he's a superhero that isn't a hero anymore. I really, really enjoy this film, and if they ever do make a sequel, I don't know where they could take it from here.
Steve, do you want a sequel for The Incredibles?
Yes. This was one of the films I was wondering why the hell they never went back to it. I really enjoy it. One, for the superhero aspect, two, because they're in like a superhero protection program, which I find very funny. Uh, and I just love watching the progression of this down and out hero having to come back into his own, and only this time it's with his family, and then you have Syndrome, and then they leave it off as if they were going on another adventure type thing at the end, another battle, but they also left it to where they could pick it up right where it left off. Um, I found it to be a very enjoyable film. I really like it. I think I've read that they are working on a sequel to it, but I could be mistaken.
I just, in the process of us recording the episode, I looked at Pixar's upcoming list, and it says there's a bunch of unannounced stuff, but like out of the rest of next year, there's actually, I don't even think Pixar is doing a film next year unless they haven't announced it, because the way their list reads is the next film they've got coming up is in 2015. Uh, I will say about The Incredibles, one of the coolest things, quite literally, is Samuel L. Jackson as Frozone. That's amazing. And the commentary on being a hero and having a home life, specifically to him and his wife. I love that scene. This is for the greater good, greater good. I am your wife.
Steve, do you have anything else that you were adding?
No, I mean, I really love that film. It's, I feel it's very deserving of its placement.
Neil, agree or disagree?
I agree. The placement, I think I would switch this around with the Iron Giant, just because that's my bias. But this completes the Brad Bird trifecta, which is this, the Iron Giant, and Rat Chef. I gotta say, I love this movie. I love that it's a love letter to the superhero genre, but it also pokes fun at it, like the whole monologuing thing. You caught me monologuing. You know, that I loved that, because that's what superheroes do. They stand there and talk, and just, with their bombastic speeches, it's like, why doesn't someone just throw a punch? And oh my god, this movie, Craig T. Nelson, I love these casting choices. You would never imagine these people in these roles, but yeah, Craig T. Nelson was perfect. Who was the wife? Helen Hunt, was it?
No, it was not Helen Hunt. It's what's her name? She was in
Everyone listening is screaming out the name.
Yes, I know. It's Holly Hunter. That's what it is.
Yeah, there are some actresses that I just get confused. But
Yeah.
God, this is such a great movie. Yeah, the introverted daughter and the extrovert son, and how that resolves toward the end of the movie. And I like that it's one of these films that says, like, yes, if you have a special talent, you should be able to express it, and you should be what you want to be, just like the Iron Giant. And it's, God, this is such a good movie. I love Brad Bird. He should do more cartoons, but sadly, I think he's moved on.
All right. Well, unanimous love for Incredibles amongst the panel. And then there were 4.
4.
Well, some people may be upset, but remember, it's still at number 4, so that is darn good. But I know some people were championing on the message boards or the website pages as far as thinking it could possibly be number 1. Number 4 is 1994 film from Disney, and that would be The Lion King. On 17 lists. So 3 people felt it necessary to leave Lion King off entirely. 1,534 points, just edging out Incredibles for the number 4 spot. If 2 people had it ranked number 1, and like I had mentioned before, if we were taking that limited rank as far as just ranking based on lists that it appeared on, Lion King would have been number 1. So
I'm really surprised it's not. I'm speechless.
3 films ranked higher than Lion King. So let's get our opinion on Lion King. Outranking Aladdin by 2 spots, outranking Beauty and the Beast by 3 spots, outranking Little Mermaid by more than that. Coming in at number 4, Mike, you started, so continue.
I'm just speechless that like what other three films could be better than this unless you're.
And this is one I honestly, as much as I said, after Aladdin was my number one pick, I went back and forth for days on if it was going to be Aladdin, Lion King, or Lion King, Aladdin. Um, so I feel that they're equally amazing.
First of all, let's get the pop culture stuff out of the way. Darth Vader is a lion, really? No, you don't say.
That was TFG and Mike, everybody. Round of applause.
Shut up.
Well, what's funny is when I watch it with my wife or whenever we hear his voice on something, I'm like, Darth Vader. She's like, Mufasa.
My only complaint with this film, and it's not really a complaint, is I very much enjoyed Simba as a cub and Simba as kind of an adolescent growing up. I wish they would have spent a little bit more time there instead of just doing the montage to when he was older. I know there was probably not an easy way to, you're not going to show his entire life, but I enjoyed his younger years almost even more. So I wanted more of that. And I liked the singing voice and the speaking voice of Simba as a young kid. But I mean, come on, you got Hakuna Matata, you got a Circle of Life, you got so much good stuff about Lion King, cool Disney villain and Scar, I guess. Whoopi Goldberg in this movie.
Hyenas, yep.
There's a lot of good things to say.
Whoopi Goldberg and Cheech Marin.
Yes.
As two of the three hyenas. I think the other one might have been Frank Welker.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was.
Steve, your thoughts on Lion King?
It's definitely a very memorable film. Really good. I think it's one of the greatest of the 90s of Disney by far, and it definitely kind of blows away everything in the past. Not only for the animal-based ones, but for just visually and musically and every other aspect of the film. It was just it's really well done. Just all the care they took into making things sound authentic and to some degree, and kind of it gives you that showing of death in animation, but it's not like, I don't know, it has a deeper meaning in this film, whereas most of the other ones it's kind of like, yeah, they're dead, boom, next scene. So I mean, it's there's a lot of different moments that it touches on in a person's life kind of thing in this film.
Just to clarify, the third hyena was Jim Cummings, not Frank Welker.
Oh, okay. Well,
either way, continue what you're going to say.
Either way, I mean,
legend.
It's not, yeah, they're both legends in their own right. The one thing that this film did that I didn't really notice a lot of other Disney films do, Scar blamed Simba for Mufasa's death. You didn't see that a lot. I mean, we might have seen it, but you didn't really see that kind of thing a lot. The whole thing. You might see self-exile in a Disney film, but you don't see self-exile because someone blames you for killing your own father. And Jeremy Irons as Scar, while Scar may not be one of the greatest Disney villains of all time, Jeremy Irons is easily one of the Disney villain voices of all time.
Yeah, that's probably true. Neil, thoughts on Lion King?
Love this movie. This is probably the movie I've seen the most of all the movies on this list, just because there was a girl in high school who made me watch this like almost every week, and I would be dumb enough to do it. But anyway, yeah, this is a great movie, and I love. You guys are talking about Simba carrying that burden and being blamed for the death of Mufasa. Yeah, that's a pretty dark thing to do to a character. I think it really gave a weight to Simba that a lot of other Disney characters just don't have, because that's a big guilt to carry on your shoulders. And I love some of the visual gags in the movie. The one that comes to mind most is the Nazi walk with the hyenas during the song that Jeremy Irons was singing. And speaking of that song, you guys are talking about how much of a god Jim Cummings was. Jeremy Irons sings the first half of that song, and then at some point in the middle, it switches to Jim Cummings.
Mm-hmm.
And you would never catch it if you didn't know. God, who else was in that movie? Oh, Mr. Bean. God, what was his name? I'm blanking on actors' names in this
Nathan,
episode.
who are you talking about? Rowan Atkinson.
Yeah, Rowan Atkinson. We have to mention him. God,
As
he was
Zazu.
great in that role. Zazu, singing "I've Got a Lovely Bunch of Coconuts." Great scene. We could just spend an hour talking about like all the great scenes in this movie. I was kind of shocked that it wasn't number one. That was kind of the one I was betting on, and I'm kind of blanking like what the hell could be above this. I'm out of guesses, so I guess we're gonna find out.
We haven't talked about Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella as Timon and Pumbaa as much, or Matthew Broderick as the adult Simba.
Ferris Bueller as adult Simba was genius casting, and
Jonathan Taylor Thomas was good as the young version too.
Yes, no, he was. He was. I'm just glad I saw him outside of Tim the Toolman Taylor.
Did anyone hear the other voice actor that was recorded as doing the song that got cut as Simba? It's not nearly as good. Anyway,
no.
Dan, are you equally surprised that this is number 4?
Yeah, I thought this was number 1 for sure. Just based upon like the love of like 90s and 2000 Disney that's been on the list so far, I just assumed this would be number 1. So I am, again, like everyone else, very shocked that it's at number 4. It's almost speechless. It was the highest Disney movie I ranked. It's not my favorite, like I mentioned, but I think it is the crowning achievement of Disney. I think it has nearly every element of Disney, of what it makes a great Disney movie. You have that emotional parent or death that has an impact on the character. You have great side characters. You have amazing music. I mean, it says something about like The Lion King when you can get such it made into a Broadway show and it's just as successful.
From a visual standpoint, it was just the landscapes and it's just like amazing.
There is, I mean, like Mike mentioned and Neil mentioned, just some of the emotional complexity to the movie is not to say unheard of, but something that I think is missing a lot with Disney as of late. If you look at some of the issues that you have Simba dealing with, they're complex, they're dark. That moment seeing Mufasa die. I mean, that's a challenging moment for sure, especially when you see Simba coming up and trying to wake up his father. And two, like I think Mike mentioned, it says something about like death as well, or taking up your destiny, or those different elements as well. And two, I just love the final moment when you have like that final climax battle and just with the fire raging. It's to me, it's amazing. I think it should be higher at top 3, top 2, but I mean it's number 4, so I guess you can't get all that upset. So, but
I know that's the same thing. I was like, I think it should be higher, but there's only a couple spots higher you can be, but it should still be higher. But yeah, I guess the people are scratching their heads and trying to come up with their list of 3 films that are above this.
They call him Mr. B.
So we'll have to see.
3.
This may be perhaps the most interesting of our top 10 because nobody ranked it number 1, and that's the only film in our top 10 that nobody ranked number 1. And actually, nobody ranked it number 2 either. The highest it got ranked was number 3, and it comes in at number 3. And that is a film from 2009 and from Pixar. So this is one of the ones that is outranking Lion King, and that would be the film Up. On 19 of the 20 lists, Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 98. Again, if we were to do that limited ranking, it would have came in 5th instead of 3rd. So it would have changed things up a little bit. So Up is one of the films that we were trying to come up with. What could outrank Lion King? Well, we have outranked it with Up. Is that correct or incorrect, Dan?
I don't have an issue with it per se. I think I ranked Lion King higher. They're 2 amazing movies, 2 movies that are doing vastly different things, though. I know that a lot of people make mention, this is not my original idea by any means, but a lot of people say that, Up had a more interesting and complex love story in 10 minutes than the Twilight films had in 6 movies. And I think that's very true. I mean, we talked. I think Neil was making mention of this earlier when he talked about Wall-E and being able to tell a story without words, and it does that within its first few moments. And too, we mentioned how Pixar likes to challenge themselves. You can't challenge yourself that much more than having a protagonist in an animated film that's like a 75-year-old man. That's I can imagine just Disney just thinking there's no way this could work because kids are not going to want to see a movie about an old guy, but they made it work. It there's so much something about, I guess, that setting the stage in the beginning, I think, makes everything that follows so much better because you have an idea of the motivations of what's going on, and to just the concept of it, it's just so out there. It's like I never would have think of a house floating in the air with a bunch of balloons and how that would work. And there's a lot of great humor. I love the dog, the dog collar that you can hear them talk. That I found endlessly funny. With squirrels, I mean, that's to me always going to be funny. But anyway, yeah, it's tough to say if it should rank higher than Lion King. I personally didn't, but I'm not going to get upset about it. I think it's certainly deserving of top 5. So it's really, it's you're good no matter what you get with this, I guess.
Mike, let's go to you next. You're the only one out of the 20 that did not rank up.
Because I think at the time when I made the list, I hadn't seen it yet.
Okay.
That's the only reason why. I have seen it since, and I do enjoy it, but I enjoy other Pixar movies more. It is an amazing story. It is a good story. It's an interesting take on the whole. As Dan said, it's an interesting take on the love story, but it's also an interesting take of love story and best. Weren't the two guys, the hero and the villain, weren't they best friends at one point, or weren't they friends in previous years or something or other?
No,
it's one of those.
He looked up, like the villain in it was someone that he looked up to as a child, I believe. That's
right. Yeah, it's some sort of similar friend kind of thing, and we've seen that before. I'm not saying that against the movie. I will agree with Dan. I did like the dog, but that other thing. Actually, that other thing, which is actually named Kevin for some stupid reason, I didn't particularly care for that character.
That doesn't surprise me.
But no, I mean, I think it's an emotionally charged movie, and I think it was a really good movie. I personally, on our list, I would flip flop 3 and 4. I don't think this is better than Lion King, but it's interesting to see where it fell.
Steve, is it worthy of being in our top 5, and in this case, our top 3?
I don't know if I'd put it in the top 5, because I think there's other ones that are within the last few films that could have been moved higher up in place of it. But I can definitely see it being in the top 15 anyway. I mean, it's an overall enjoyable film, and I do have to agree with the comment earlier about it tells more of a story than Twilight. That's not hard to do, though. But it's a nice little adventure and story that kind of one of those end of life fulfillment type things, and of course the young kid and everything else. So it's not one of my favorite films, but I definitely see a place for it in the top 15.
Neil, agree or disagree?
I put it at number 5, so I think it does deserve to be in the top 5. It's hard to say whether this is better or not as good as Lion King, because it's starting to all blur together now. It's like, how could I possibly rank these now? I do think that this is a great film, and it does deserve to be in the top 5. When Blanchard said something about that other thing, I was like, please don't be talking about Russell, the little Boy Scout kid who was also along on the journey.
Oh no! No, I was talking about the animals.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, that was a cute thing that I wasn't even expecting in the movie, was that the kid just tagging along. on the adventure. That I like that character. He was very atypical. A, because he's Asian, and B, because he's fat. He's like this little fat kid who's, you don't see that in a lot of animated films. So that was kind of cool. Great film. That's all I gotta say.
Another unanimous opinion amongst us. And there's only 2 spots left. What could we possibly have left? Or what out there are people still trying to see squeezed into the countdown that now they are losing hopes of? Let's see what's next.
2.
Well, with number 2 and with number 1, we are going to pass a couple milestones here because the last 4 films have been in the 1,500 point range. This should give people an idea as far as the voting went. It's not even close now. For the last 4 were in the 1500s. The next 2 are in the 1700s. So the next 2 blew the competition out of the water. And also the next 2 films both appeared on all submitted lists. So nobody left either of these next 2 films off of their list. So let's start with number 2, and that would be 2010's film from Pixar, Toy Story 3. 1,713 points, 20 lists, was ranked 1 by 1 person, Rotten Tomato score of 99. And if you were taking the limited rank, it would have dropped down to number 4 on our list, but it comes in at number 2, Toy Story 3. Neil?
Oh my God, this movie. Yeah, much better than Toy Story 2. This is, words do not describe this movie. The first image that always comes into my mind of this is like almost at the end where they're in the incinerator and they think they're all gonna die, and oh God, I'm giving away the end of the movie. Well, not exactly, but they think they're all gonna die, and they all hold hands together, and I'm like, oh my God. It's kind of dark.
The reason why it's always burned into your head is because that's what they used. That's what the trailer companies used as the promotional stuff.
That's true, yeah. But it's the fact that they just went there, and it's a very powerful, emotional scene. God, that scene's great. God, this is. I'm trying to remember. I've only seen this movie a couple times, but I'm trying to remember more of it, but I can't. But I do know that it was so good, and yeah, I've just got nothing.
Steve, coming in at number 2 is Toy Story 3, quite a few spots higher than Toy Story 2. What are your thoughts?
I don't have a problem with it, although this is telling of what number 1 will be. Just saying. But no, I mean, I really love this film. I think for a sequel and coming this late in the game, I think that it knocked it out of the park. But there's definitely a lot of great moments in this film, making it a perfect send-off for it if they never made another one again.
It's like every conversation we had throughout the 100 countdown about sequels, it's like, Toy Story aside, the Toy Story sequels aside, let's talk about all the other sequels, and will we see anything else besides those sequels? Dan, Toy Story 3 coming in at number 2.
Yeah, Ed, I think this is probably, I talked about, I think a Lion King is a crowning achievement of Disney. I think this is, at this point, probably the crowning achievement of Pixar. It started with Toy Story, and I think everything that's come after this hasn't been as good. Not saying they can't get back there, but yeah, like Neil mentioned, that scene in the incinerator is just, it is like, you didn't think a story about toys could have so much like weight to it and so much like sadness, and like I think that says a lot about Pixar when you actually sit back and think, you know what, they could actually kill all these characters. There's many studios that you would actually think that, and I think that they've earned that moment throughout everything they've done up to that point. I just love too how when Pixar's at its best is when it takes, like with The Incredibles or other movies, it takes certain concepts or certain elements and puts it in its movie, and sometimes you don't even realize it. Like a lot of the movie with the daycare center, and like how it adds in moments of like Cool Hand Luke and The Great Escape and all these little elements of the other movies that deal with the same concepts of the prisons and whatnot, and two, just little touches the animation, like you see them getting these characters getting like marks on them, like from markers and stuff like that, almost like pseudo prison tattoos in a way, just in how they change throughout time too. And there's not many movies that can bring in like so many new characters and still, but all the new characters are just as interesting, just as fleshed out. They fit into the world perfectly, and two, like this is probably the best villain of all the Toy Story movies by far. So I Lotso, something about him, just he's just an evil character, and just how you you don't know at first, and you have an idea and how he develops and everything too. But yeah, it's an emotionally powerful movie, and that beyond the last few moments, the closing moments of this movie, I think we would all say, is just, it puts the perfect bow on the end of this movie. It's anyone that's ever had toys, anyone who's ever it just speaks so much to childhood and letting go of your childhood in that last few moments, in the closing moments, and it is so. I mean, it can easily bring a tear to your eye, and what it's able to do. So very deserving of top 5. I think it kind of, like Steve mentioned, we kind of know where it's going from here. So, but interesting nonetheless.
Dan, what do you think of James Bond as Mr. Pricklepants?
Hey, he has got a good voice to him. I got to give him that. So
yeah,
I think to me that the standout was Michael Keaton as Ken.
Oh yeah,
he was just hilarious. I
am not a doll. And I love this movie. This movie is, as much as I enjoy the first Toy Story, this movie for me personally is the best one out of all 3 because of how emotionally charged it is. Everything that Dan just said, because of all of that, this movie is so good. And what I love about Pixar is when they do movies like this, whether this is the final installment or not, they then take those characters and give us other stuff like Partysaurus Rex or Hawaiian Vacation or other little shorts without having to do a whole nother film. And I wish studios would kind of pay more attention to that. Overall, Toy Story 3, I absolutely loved it. Michael Keaton and Jodie Benson as Ken and Barbie, that's just perfect casting. That is just the Little Mermaid and Batman in a relationship in a toy movie. That's amazing.
This will always go down for me as like the animated movie that made grown men cry. 'Cause that's all I heard about from people that were seeing this when it had come out in the theater. Neil, anything you want to say about Toy Story before we move on?
Yeah, there was one last thing I wanted to point out. Something I almost forgot. For anyone who's an anime fan and is a little kind of hurt that there's none in the top 20, I just want to say that Totoro is in Toy Story 3. Best cameo of the movie, and I missed it the first time. I can't believe I didn't see him.
There you go. So there's only one spot left. Let's get to the revealing.
And 1.
Coming in number 1 on our top 100 animated film countdown.
Brother Bear.
1,770 points. It was on all 20 lists. Like I said, if you took its limited rank, it would drop down to number 3. But it comes in number 1 for us. Rotten Tomato score of 100 from 2009. Naruto the movie. Okay, I'm just kidding. That was at the other end of our list. That was the worst ranked movie that got a vote. Of course, it is the original film from 1995, and that would be Toy Story. The first one. Just go around the panel here. Not that you didn't see this coming. Dan, Toy Story coming in at number 1.
I mean, I would say it's interesting they're coming back to back like this. I would think, as if you go comparing Toy Story 3, I think Toy Story 3 is probably a better movie, but also considering the fact that you have 15 years of animation that went with it and that allowed them to go beyond that. And 2, I think a lot of what Toy Story 3 is able to accomplish, a lot of that emotional weight that's there would not exist without the original Toy Story.
Oh no, yeah.
And I mean, I love Toy Story. It was I think I ranked it within my top 5, top 3. I feel like I've said that about 20 movies by now. But I just can't think on top of my head. I ranked it really high. I think it was the highest Pixar movie. Again, similar to Snow White, but I think it's better, a lot better. Is you look at where we are with animation. It's CGI is taken over. Unfortunately, like classic hand drawn animation has gone by the wayside, or fortunately, depending on who you are. And a lot of that was due to Pixar. I mean, it was an innovation of innovations. And it was again a really good movie with a lot of great characters. So I have no issue with it being number one. I think if you were going to say any movie is the best animated movie of all time, you almost always run the risk of hyperbole and overstating it. It's tough to give that moniker to anything. I think there's a few that can wear that wear that reward well. Toy Story is one of them. Lion King is another. So I personally don't have any issue with it being number one. I think you can argue there are better movies, but considering its overall quality, its impact on the genre, and all things that coincides, how it launched Pixar into what it is today, I think it's deserving for sure.
Steve, Toy Story coming in at number one?
Definitely cannot argue. I pretty much agree with everything everybody's already said. It's far and wide the best Pixar film overall. I mean, just because that's what started them out, and the fact that this one film spawned every Pixar film since, and spawned the only successful sequels out of Pixar, I think that speaks volumes.
For sure. Mike?
Toy Story was, as we've kind of already said, was groundbreaking. Toy Story and what I'd like to see in the comments for this episode if people want to argue Toy Story versus Lion King. And I honestly think we should probably take the, what did you call it? The limited rank. Yeah, take the limited rank number one film and the actual number one film and do a GCRN Wars episode. No, I'm dead serious. Lion King versus Toy Story.
Well, let me just, for shits and giggles here, taking our top 10 rank as we did it, going from 10 to 1, Finding Nemo, WALL-E, Iron Giant, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Incredibles, Lion King, Up, Toy Story 3, and Toy Story. If we were to take the limited rank, going in reverse order from 1 to 10, we would have had Lion King number 1, Beauty and the Beast number 2, Toy Story number 3, Toy Story 3 be next, then Up, then actually it would go to Akira at number 6, Spirited Away at 7, Incredibles at 8, Princess Mononoke at number 9, and then Aladdin at number 10. So that would have been the limited rank version.
One of the best things I love about this movie, and I didn't realize it when I first saw it when it came out, but ever since then I know, you basically have Sergeant Hartman as the army sergeant in this. Arlie Ermey was the voice of Sarge. I absolutely love that. And the voice, I mean, Tom Hanks and Tim Allen as Woody and Buzz, that's awesome. You've got Cliff Clavin as Dr. Porkchop. You've got Don
Rickles.
Don Rickles as Potato Head. Was he Potato Head?
Yep.
Yeah. You've got Don Rickles as Potato Head, and then and I know we're not talking about the sequels, but I have to. Okay, Toy Story 2 is not, it's the middle film. To me, it's an okay film. It's not a bad film at all. But the fact in Toy Story 2 that they, at the end of this film, it's a Mrs. Potato Head, everybody. And in the next film, you're wondering, who are they going to cast to voice her? They get George Costanza's mom to voice Mrs. Potato Head. That was simply amazing casting. As far as the first film, there's nothing wrong. If anyone can nitpick this film and find something wrong with it, there's something wrong with that person.
Well, I mean, you can find something wrong with everything, probably.
No. I mean, like truly nitpick every single piece of the film. Sure, yeah, you're going to find something wrong, but yeah. Absolutely loved it. I love the animosity between Buzz and Woody. I love the fact that they have to come together and team up. Um, I really like the alien guys from Pizza Planet. I thought they were cool. Overall, I cannot say anything against where we have this film at this point. I mean, it truly is one of the most groundbreaking films of all time.
I'm getting a little lost just because we had dual back-to-back Toy Stories. Have I not let? Is there anybody I haven't let speak on Toy Story the original?
I have not spoken yet.
Go ahead.
Well, everyone's been gushing about this, so I'm gonna go in a different direction. Still gonna gush, but I'm gonna gush over the voice actors, or actually over the characters. Basically, that they took all these beloved old toys that we all grew up with and made them real characters. I mean, look at Potato Head, Don Rickles. Looking back, there was a Potato Head cartoon series, and this blows that away. The Slinky Dog. The Slinky Dog wasn't even in production when this movie was made, and they brought it back. Yeah, the Army Sergeant. Everyone had those green Army men. I mean, everyone had them.
Yeah.
God, this was. I mean, it was. Oh, the Hot Wheels was in this. They had the Red Baron car, which was the coolest car, and the only toy that they didn't get was Barbie, and Mattel was like, sure as hell knocking on Disney's door to get her in the next movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
whoever the person was that was sitting in the meeting or the pitch room or whatever, that the first person that had the idea to do what you're saying and come up with all these classic toys and turn them into characters deserves all the credit in the world.
And whoever was at Mattel who said we're not putting Barbie in this movie, that person should be fired. Fired.
Yeah, for sure.
Great movie.
I don't want to get in too much of overall reactions because we will do that in the wrap-up show, but in each episode we've at least reacted to the episode in itself. So looking back at 20 through 1, breaking it down a little bit, obviously Disney and Pixar dominated. We didn't quite get to the 10 Pixar films that Dan predicted. We got to 8 of them. And we had 1 DreamWorks film and 1 Warner Brothers film. Otherwise, the rest were Disney. Saw a bunch of the classic Disney princesses early on. Then we saw the 90s Disney come up later on with Wreck-It Ralph thrown in between, which I said might be the surprise of the top 20. Just looking overall at our 20 through 1, though, get your reactions, and then, like I said, we'll have all kinds of time to react the list overall, to break down numbers by decade, by years, by companies, by all kinds of different things. We'll get into honorable mentions and all the stuff that did get voted on but did not make the list, since there was 350 films that got voted on. We'll talk about those that we haven't talked about yet. So we'll do all that in the wrap-up show. But just looking at the 20 through 1, Dan, what's your reaction?
Surprised and not surprised. Surprised by number 1 in some ways, because I think, like most, I thought it'd be Lion King. Not surprised. There's so many Pixar movies. It's hard to really argue against it, though. I mean, they have been. I think they brought animation up to another level in a lot of ways, and have been such like a dominated force for such a long time. I mean, obviously, Wreck-It Ralph. Like I said, I don't dislike the movie, but it's probably the biggest surprise of that it's made it up this high. And I did find it interesting when you mentioned the limited average and like what the top 10 would be if we went off just that. And I think that's I almost a better. I think that says a lot about the list overall. I think kind of what I've noticed so far is this isn't necessarily. It's kind of like Family Feud in a way, where the answers aren't necessarily the right answers. The answers are the ones people are most likely to give. Just like it's kind of more popularity than quality, which is fine. I think it's what happens when you have such a huge pool of people to get from. But I am happy about a lot of it. Iron Giant making it in the top 10, I think, is great. Aladdin and Lion King being in the top 10. So happy overall, and I think it's kind of a good way to end.
And after the wrap up and everything, we will post dual versions of the list. We will post that limited list so that people can react to that in general as well, to see how different it may have been, because there's definitely some changes that would have happened overall. And I will say that you might have been the most pleasantly surprised as to how things changed if we go off of limited average, given the first film we talked about would have came in the top 20. So that will be an interesting list to look at in reaction to this as well. Neil, your thoughts on 20 through 1?
Pretty solid, I think. Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph's probably the big surprise. I would still put it pretty high, but probably not as high as it ended up being. I know I didn't rank it anywhere near that high, but I wasn't, like I said earlier, I wasn't too upset that it got there. Everything else pretty solid. I would probably jumble some of them around if it were my decision, but I can't complain about how it ended up.
I pretty much there were no drop the mic walk away moments for me this time around.
That's good.
It's very interesting, this top 100, because not all of the DC films got ranked, but a majority of them did, yet Marvel never showed up.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah,
keep it to 20 through 1, sir.
I know. I'm just saying it's really, really interesting in that. With 20 to 1, I really have no complaints. Like Neil said, there are probably a few I'd jumble around. But other than that, I'm fine with it.
And like I said at the beginning, I don't think anyone can make the argument. Like I said, you can jumble them around, you can change the ranks, but these are all the ones that we talked about, 20 through 1, are definitely deserving to be on our list somewhere. You can't make an argument that any of them should not be on our list. In fact, I'm sure you can't really make an argument that any of them shouldn't be in our top 50 probably. I mean, I guess you could. It gets a little bit easier to make that argument, but they all deserve to be somewhere here. Steve, thoughts on 20 through 1?
Some of them I agree with, some of them I don't. Like the older Disney stuff in there, I mean, I still see other films that could have been in there, or certain ones replaced. So in that instance, I can see that. But I think pretty much everything that's in the top 10, I really can't argue with where, the fact that they're in the top 10.
Right, and that's the thing. In order to put something else in the top 10, you have to take something out, and that's another way to look at it. I will say I'm somewhat interested or surprised possibly that as far as classic Disney, we didn't see anything past number 14 on our list. And in fact, after Sleeping Beauty came in at number 14, we didn't see anything that predated 1991. Beauty and the Beast in 1991 was the earliest film in our top 13 films. So definitely dominated by the last few decades. So that was a little surprising. I thought maybe an older film, a classic Disney film, would sneak somewhere in there, but it did not. Anyone else thoughts on that or anything else before I know we don't have I'm actually looking forward to the wrap-up show because we get to do a whole lot of fun discussion, analyzing and talking about honorable mentions, so it'll be fun. Last words going around the table. Mike, anything before we close up?
No. I mean, it's been a blast overall, and it's been really interesting seeing the different reactions on the website. Like you said, we'll get to that next time around. But no real. I mean, 20 to 1, I can't argue with it.
All right, Steve or Neil or Dan, anybody last thoughts before we close out and get ready for our wrap up?
I'm just glad there's no no big bad movie or we listed that as really surprising or I think out of place. So that's pretty
G.I.
good.
Joe the movie did not turn up in the top 10. So
no, and no Brother Bear either. So that's always that had a chance. So I think it's a rather fair list, honestly. So I am looking forward to just hearing people's feedback of the list as a whole. I know a lot of people predicted kind of where they thought it was going, so that'll be fun. Just looking at also just the honorable mentions that didn't make it, because there were a few movies that were on my list that I think are deserving. But so it'll be kind of fun to talk about those in the next episode.
Yeah, I definitely have, we talked about in order to put stuff on, you have to take stuff off. I definitely have a good number of films that I'd like to talk about as far as replacing some of the 90s and 2000 Disney films that we saw. So, Mike?
Oh, that's
what do people need to know, feedback-wise, etc.?
Yeah. Well, that's there you have it, folks. The GCRN Top 100 Animated Films Countdown. Join us next time when we will be wrapping up the entire project. In between then and now, send any and all emails or MP3 files if you want to get in on the show with your own thoughts of the entire project, to feedback@geekcastradio.com. As always, you can send us a shout out on Twitter or Facebook. It's at GeekCast on Twitter. Facebook is facebook.com/GeekCastRadioNetwork. And of course, commenting on the website. We are probably not going to read every single of the 300 and something comments we got, which thank you so much to everybody. But you have until Wednesday, December 4th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to send in any emails, any audio feedback, anything. You can send to feedback@geekcastradio.com. For now, I am TFG1 Mike with
Evie's Mr. Neil,
Steve Megatron Phillips,
Movie Revolt Dan,
and Optimus Solo.
Thank you for listening, and make sure you unleash the geek in you. We will catch you next time.
You've just listened to GeekCast Radio on the GeekCast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at GeekCast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCast Radio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.